Hey everybody, what's going on? I am Rob Cesternino, and I'm very excited to have a panel here today that is going to be one where we are going to be discussing a topic that is on the mind of many Survivor fans. We are going to be talking to helping out your friend that just discovered a new show on Netflix known as Survivor, as we are guiding new Survivor fans in the Netflix era. Yes, Netflix fans have just discovered this crazy new reality show where a number of Americans will try to outwit, outplay, and outlast each other for 39 days to win $1 million in Netflix's hottest new reality series. And so we are here to talk about it with the two biggest fans of the Netflix breakout show in the entire world. They were going to be talking about this. I said, hey, let me jump in. Let me come along for the ride as we discuss guiding new fans in the Netflix era. First, let's welcome in the host of our international Survivor coverage. Yes, tell your friends in other countries, or tell your friends that there's actually Survivor all around the world. And there's one woman who's covering it all. That would be the great Shannon Guss. Shannon, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me, but please don't tell your friends about international yet.
Not
I'm
yet.
so wary of scaring off these new fans. We've got them in the net. Please don't scare them off. Don't tell them how involved this is. Just make it sound casual, make us all sound normal, and we'll all get through this okay.
Yes. Hey, everything is normal and cool over here at International Survivor. Yeah. All right. Also joining us here, a Survivor historian, a man who is also spending a lot of time thinking about what does it mean for Survivor to be on Netflix. Give it up for Mike Bloom.
Just want to make everyone aware that we are 90% here specifically for Matthew McConaughey, right? This podcast is specifically for him and him only.
Hey, that's the great thing about Survivor. We keep getting older. These old Survivor seasons keep staying the same age.
So true. I love that we're all obsessed with these celebrities who are getting into it, because it's celebrities I don't even know or care about most of the time, and then I'm like, oh my god, you're watching too.
Yeah, someone like asked me like, oh, Fetch Cat is into Survivor. Like, oh, great, good for Fetch Cat.
Yeah,
and then sharing it like, thank you for your support is how I feel. But I'm like, I don't care about these celebrities usually. But now that they're Survivor fans, I'm like, welcome to the tribe.
I mean, this is building towards maybe an inevitable Celebrity Survivor season. For a while, we thought it was just going to be staffed with people from Parks and Rec and Neil Patrick Harris, but I think we're able to fill out the cast a bit more now.
All right, so for the uninitiated who might have not been on top of this, Netflix has added 2 Survivor seasons to its roster. Season 20 of Survivor Heroes versus Villains, and Season 28, Survivor Cagayan. These shows have become quite hot on Netflix, according to the algorithm. Yes, they have been in the top 10 shows on Netflix recently since their debut, and a lot of new Survivor fans have stumbled upon them and have discovered Survivor for the first time. We are not talking specifically to those people, because how on earth would they find us? And if so, why would they jump in to this specific podcast, this episode of Robin's Podcast? Instead, we are talking to you, the person who has a friend who knows that you watch Survivor and said, hey, guess what I just watched? Now you can guide them here in the Netflix era. This will be a story in 3 parts, Shannon.
Yes. Okay. So we want to talk about Netflix. But by the way, the reason that we had to come to Rob with this, because Mike and I were arguing about how people should watch, which all of Twitter is doing, arguing, debating, whatever you want to say.
Politely disagreeing.
Polite is a strong word. Anyway, and we were like, maybe we should just make this a podcast. So we brought it to Rob. So Rob is kind of like along for the ride in the discussion that Mike and I were having. But we want to talk part 1. The Netflix era. What does it mean? What does it mean for the future of the show? What season should be added?
Consider me a mediator in your debate.
Yeah, in our friendship. Will we survive this? Because Mike has some hot takes. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I agree. So
will this be blood or water?
Exactly. Part 2, I think we're going to talk about where should people go to next? What season should they start with? Which is a massive debate. I put out a bit of a poll a couple of weeks ago. where should people go next if they've watched Cagayan? Came back to my phone and Twitter was like, you are receiving too many notifications. Would you like us to filter those notifications? And I've already received that one other time before, and was when I did the Island of the Idols merch know-it-alls. Those two things shouldn't be the two times that Twitter has been overwhelmed for me. So,
I've never gotten that message.
But maybe
because you're a blue check, it assumes that you're automatically getting a certain threshold of notifications every day.
I don't know. Maybe they just come in dribs and drabs, my notifications.
No, maybe it's that maybe they kind of have a level of everyone that they assume you're going to get, and you're always getting a high level, whereas I'm always at a certain level.
Your bar is significantly higher than those of us unchecked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I didn't even know the can of worms I was opening up with that. I thought like a pretty pleasant poll. I put in a few options, and they weren't good enough for Twitter, so I'm already concerned about how this is going to go. And then the third part we want to talk about, a tweet Mike put out. What order should they watch in? How should they watch? Is it a 40-season commitment? And I'm sure Mike probably got something of a, do you want to filter these notifications?
Yeah, it was an interesting Black Friday.
Yeah, it was like a lot of opinions. And everyone has their opinion, and I totally get that, because I feel like as Survivor fans, we've spent, up to 20 years with all this completely useless knowledge in our brain, and now it's somewhat relevant, and we just want to give it to the world in a way that we see fit. So I get it, because I'm the same, but it's definitely something we need to weigh in on, because this is a huge talking point at the moment.
Okay. And for people who are here, who have watched these seasons and might be looking for podcast coverage, let me point you in the right direction. Not so much for Heroes versus Villains, but certainly for Survivor Cagayan. RHAP had existed for 4 years at that time, and we have some great podcast coverage that you could listen to, and you will be completely unspoiled, because we were unspoiled at the time. Now, in the archives of Rob as a Podcast, the category of Survivor Cagayan is from the oldest to most recent. So if you go to robasawebsite.com/survivor28, you could start with our cast preview and see everything we were thinking, including episode by episode, exit interviews, and everything along the way as we covered a phenomenal season of Survivor. But I've been talking with the patrons of Rob as a Podcast and trying to figure out, what should we do? We've also created a podcast feed exclusively of our Survivor Cagayan know-it-alls and exit interviews. You could get that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Go to I'll give you the link for Apple Podcasts. We'll send out the link for Spotify. robbinswebsite.com/Cagayan podcast. We've also made a YouTube playlist of all of the know-it-alls that happened right after those episodes aired at robbinswebsite.com/survivor28KIA. And we'll put all those links in the show notes for you to check out. So pass along to anybody who may be looking for some additional podcast coverage of Survivor Cagayan.
Yeah, and we'll also say right at the top here, again, this podcast is not necessarily for the new fans of Survivor that are in the title of this podcast.
Spoilers coming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. To the point where we're going to be talking about stuff from all 40 seasons. I think when it comes to this idea of what to recommend next, we can't necessarily tiptoe around, okay, I'm suggesting this season for no particular reason. So yeah, spoilers are going to be abound. Yet another reason why you should just rely on a friend who's listening to this podcast. You know what? Recruit a +1. Say, hey, can you listen to this podcast for me and then tell me what seasons to watch next? Right. That's a win-win for everybody.
Right.
And I wanted to say, if you don't have a friend, I will be your friend. You can DM me on Twitter at Shannon Gates, GAITZ, and I will create a list for you. If you've somehow found this podcast as a new fan because it has a combination of the word Survivor and Netflix in it, and you don't want to get spoiled, to jump out now, DM me, and I will do that for you.
Now you're gonna you got too many DMs. That's gonna be your next notification on Twitter.
I recommend a lot of seasons to people in the DMs. I'm already doing it, so I'm happy to add you to the list.
Okay. All right. So Survivor in the Netflix era. Now, I have not honestly given a lot of thought to how will Netflix change Survivor. I think this is a fascinating subject. Shannon, what do you think does Netflix mean to Survivor the franchise?
This is, I think, a pretty huge thing for Survivor. Obviously, like the way that viewing has gone, network TV is kind of out, streaming platforms are kind of in, and Survivor having that success on a streaming platform shows that it could go in that direction. It shows as well, like, new fans are enjoying it. I know there's some like vindication. It's always been, oh, that show's still on. Oh, that show's still on. And Gabby Pascuzzi had an amazing tweet about that. That's like been 20 years of that. And now it's like, oh, I've discovered this indie show on Netflix that is so cool. Did you know that Survivor is about social strategy and not about survivalism? So there is that vindication. I think it has massive ramifications of the show, and I think we'll talk about it. But for me, season 41 is definitely going to start a new era for a lot of different reasons. And it's so pivotal that we get this right, because I think if we can kind of capitalize on this new fandom, capitalize on some promising progressions in the show, we could mean it goes on for decades rather than stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, so I just remember the discourse, even over the past 10 years, has been like, it'd be interesting to have Survivor on Netflix for a number of reasons. One is episode lengths, right? You're not restricted to the 42 minutes with commercials. Maybe when it comes to certain things allowed by censors as well, that could be another sort of interesting caveat to putting on a streaming service. And this experiment has sort of been fulfilled here. And honestly, this has shown me that, like, if you are a reality show, old or new, you need to be on Netflix to be discovered. I know that the adage is that we live in an era where there are too many streaming services, but I think this has proven that out of all of them, Netflix is king, to the point where Survivor has been on Hulu for quite some time. Like, almost half of the seasons have been available on Hulu for, I'm going to say, at least 5 years. Nary a wink from the new fan and celebrity community. The second it drops on Netflix, you have people frothing out the mouth over it. Now, it might also be due to the timing of things, with more people spending time indoors, but I don't know. This really shows me that if you want to really draw eyes to yourself, especially as a reality show, no matter how old you may be or what seasons drop there, I think Netflix is the way to go.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Survivor has been available for streaming on CBS All Access as well for, I think it's probably about 5 years that you could watch all of the Survivor episodes at any time. But just the algorithm of Netflix, which tells you, what's new, what's featured, what other Netflix people are watching. The recent edition of the Netflix Top 10, that Netflix does a really great job of getting things in front of your eyeballs. And so being on that platform, I have no idea what the financial ramifications of this deal is. I don't know if Netflix is paying CBS / SEG / Mark Burnett to air Survivor, or I don't know if Survivor's paying Netflix.
Survivor's getting more out of this, I feel.
Yeah, it's a good deal to be on Netflix.
Yeah, I think that Netflix did it well by offering 2 seasons. We'll talk about if those seasons were a good choice. Obviously, they choose Cagayan, one of the best newbie seasons, I think, objectively decided. Perfect season of TV. I think that was a great choice. Then they chose Heroes versus Villains, a decision I'm sure we'll get into, a season that ruins much of the first half of the series, that you can't truly appreciate without at least some background info. But in isolation, still an incredible season of television, maybe one of the best seasons of television that exists for me. So I like that they put out just a couple, because if they put out 40, I think people would be like overwhelmed by it. They put out a couple of objectively excellent seasons of television, the kind of thing where if you're watching any other reality TV, I think you're going to be hooked on this. They started people off slow, and now I think we can start adding a couple more, give people more what they want, but they've really introduced people to it well, instead of just like dumping dozens of seasons where people might have jumped in a mediocre season and never looked back, never looked at it again.
If you're a little more adventurous and perhaps looking to, say, jump into a random season at a particular point in time, also, there is since the last season of Survivor ended, Survivor has started airing 24/7 on Pluto TV, which is a streaming service, but it is free. It basically works like it is a channel that runs Survivor episodes all in a row every single day. So if you are somebody who maybe cannot afford Netflix but are looking to go back and be watching old Survivor seasons, that's another way to be getting exposed to Survivor episodes sequentially. If you have a whole day, you can knock out a season.
Yeah, or if you just want to have something on in the background and you watched the season before, it's a great way to just sort of like not think of what you need to choose specifically. But yeah, I think the choice to strategically put 2 seasons on, like you said, Shannon, it's almost like introducing a drug to someone, right? Like you give them just a taste.
It definitely is a drug.
And then when it's acquired, you get them into more. And I think, I do wonder if this is a thing where they went to some sort of, either they went to Survivor themselves or they went to like a Survivor fan who worked for Netflix of like, we have to pick 2 Survivor seasons. They're like, well, you got to choose the 2 best seasons. You've got to choose.
They Googled what are the 2 best Survivor seasons.
Rob, do you have a ranking somewhere where you have these two seasons? Because it could have been you. You might be the top Google search.
Yeah, I may have.
You did one before 30, but I can't remember. I want to say your top two might have been Heroes vs. Villains and Pearl Islands, not Cagayan.
No, I don't think I had Pearl Islands above Cagayan. I was always a Cagayan lover.
Well, I think didn't you incorporate the audience rankings?
Oh,
though,
we might have incorporated the audience. I mean, the audience might have had it. Yeah.
Surely any fan would have been like, well, 20 is the best, but you can't. Like, you don't understand. You're going to ruin all these seasons. There's winners. Like, I think that you'd have to just go to the internet. They can't talk back and be like, people seem to really love Heroes versus Villains. Let's just put that in. Because, I mean, let's talk about it. I know Josh Wiggle was saying on Twitter that he thought this was a good idea. Like, I think this was such a bad idea from Netflix. I'm so sad that so many people have been spoiled on so much through this that so many amazing seasons, Pearl Islands, Micronesia. And the sad thing is that while Heroes vs. Villains may objectively be the best show in the entire series, there are other incredible newbie seasons, modern newbie seasons. We'll talk about maybe what could have been better options or what should come next. But I think that you can get the same effect with Cagayan and another incredible newbie season where people are going to want to watch more without spoiling half the series for new viewers.
So I think the main... There are 2 points that I think, granted, might be a bit more unfounded, because I do agree with you, Shannon. I don't think it's a terrible choice, but Heroes versus Villains on there. But I want to compare the experience for a new viewer to, like, you're a +1 to a really great wedding, but you don't know the bride and groom whatsoever. Like, objectively, you're gonna have a fun time, but it would even be better had you had any context and had you known the people that were involved in it. I do wonder if it's sort of could it be a possibility of people watched the show early on and dropped off, and they wanted to bring them back by being like, hey, remember Boston Rob, remember Rupert, remember Colby and Jerry, they're back. And two, that was a big anniversary season, and they were very much recognizing that as well. So maybe because it was like one of the big Survivor seasons celebrating Survivor, they would want to bring that out. But I do see your point that I think there is so much history behind this season, especially from our perspective, when we're going to talk later on about how context is king with a lot of this stuff in terms of enjoying some bonus effects from a season, that it's a weird choice to place it in there when there are so many other great newbie seasons you can use.
So I don't think it's that bad. I totally understand why it may be like, well, you are ruining seasons for other people, but I do see the logic in, okay, hey, play your strongest card here. And maybe, there'll be a person that's like, oh, I love this show so much. Now I want to go back. Like, oh, these other old seasons are ruined. If you've already won, you've already got that person. And I think that
That's such a shame.
I guess so. But for those people who are going back and watching the old seasons, yeah, they know the outcome, but that knowing the winner does not a Survivor season make. It's like the ride is the fun, not necessarily that oh, okay, well, now I know Sandra won Pearl Island, so now that season is no good.
Okay, you were coming here to mediate between me and Mike, and I feel like more incensed by that statement than anything Mike has ever said.
Please.
I mean, I agree. Like, if you happen to find out the winner, you can still enjoy it for sure. I've certainly rewatched a lot of the old seasons when I knew the winner, but like, it wasn't something that had to happen. And if you have the choice, I mean, these people know that Parvati wins Micronesia. When they go back, like, they'll not have the same emotional reaction to like Sari being shocked, voted out at 3, and that being a final 2. Like, those moments, they do add to it. I think it does elevate it. And I think that it's a very different experience watching when you know the winner than when you don't. Both are enjoyable when it's a great season, because Survivor is an amazing show, but one is a lot better, I think. Like, they didn't have to do this. And how much better is Hero versus Villains, one of the most incredible seasons, than putting in a David versus Goliath, which is also incredible. I don't think that there's much difference there between those two seasons where it's like, well, I would have been obsessed if I had Heroes versus Villains, but with this amazing newbie season, something like a David versus Goliath, I'm not obsessed. I think they lost a lot more than they gained. And I care about the fact that these people are going to go, like, that they have these moments ruined for them when it was just so unnecessary.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because I've seen more people, I think, talk about Cagayan, and this might just be like the circles that I'm a part of. I don't know. Have people who have been tracking their timelines, has there been a lot of talk about like Heroes versus Villains?
No, other than Sandra live tweeting it, I feel like that people are watching Cagayan.
I mean, maybe the unintended consequence I'm thinking of is that people who do watch Heroes versus Villains for the first time, I see some people, like that guy from The Bachelor, is like, well, I like this person, so I'm going to jump to another season featuring this person. Like, I know, like, I think like Keke Palmer is a huge Parvati fan. And so she's like, give me all the seasons with Parvati in them. And so maybe, I don't know,
She's
again,
going to love fans versus favorites then.
Yeah, but she could have loved it more. She should have started anyway.
But
it's
yeah,
ruined for her.
Yeah, it's
Cook
interesting.
Islands one, not so much.
Maybe not so much, but yeah, I mean that's the other thing as well. Is if you use returnees, then you have sort of an excuse to like naturally have someone go down the rabbit hole of if you like this person, then you can check out this other piece, as opposed to like
which is how the Netflix algorithm works, Mike.
Right, but it's like, oh great, you love, oh great, you love. I'm trying to think of like who's a non-returning Cagayan player. Oh, you love Jeffra. Well, the buck stops short here.
You love
All
Jeffra.
Jeffra stands. They have nowhere to go. Like if you're not seeing Heroes Villains as much on Twitter, like I'm definitely trying to pretend it doesn't exist. I'm like, how cool the Cagayan is on Netflix. Just that one season. Just watch. Yeah. But the way you're saying, the way that people try to go through characters, I've seen that happen worryingly twice. Someone tweeted to me, they're like, I loved Cagayan, I loved Tony, I'm going straight to season 40 to see what happens there. And I was like, no, could not. I was like, please, random on Twitter, I am begging you not to do that. And then, as you said, Ivan from The Bachelorette, he was like, love Tony going straight to 34. And I was like, again, highly considered
a bad decision for so many reasons.
Terrible season. And it also ruins others. Like, it could not be a worse decision. Again, I'm begging you, Ivan, not to do that.
So I totally understand everything you're saying. I just feel like that the exercise of getting Survivor on Netflix is to make new Survivor fans. And if they are less perfect Survivor fans, or they're having the less ideal experience than people who watched it in the real time, I'm willing to live with that if they are now Survivor fans. Like so they'll join us from the here on in, that they did not have a perfect experience coming in, but we made them. We got them.
So that being said, then let's say, and I would imagine this being the case unless some weird dealings between CBS and Netflix happen, that there is going to eventually be another batch of seasons to get released on Netflix. I don't think they're going to release the other 38 because that would just be a huge cascade after they just let out a little, bits of water. Mm-hmm. So the question is, if we're getting into the ear of the Netflix staffers here, what seasons should go on to Netflix next?
Well, Are we still in part one?
Yeah, this is still part one.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. Okay. Well, and Shannon, I do agree that 37, I think, probably would have been just as fine as 20. I have no disagreements. I'm just saying if we get them, then good job then finding new fans.
I think Mike and I are lying awake at night like, oh my God, those people got spoiled on all these seasons. Like, I think we're trying to craft the perfect experience for these new fans. Like, that's the point of this. It's like Survivor is an amazing show. Like, I'm sure that if you watch the best seasons, even if you are spoiled, you'll enjoy it. We will capture these people, but we could capture them the right way. Right. And that matters to someone like me and Mike.
Yes, it's like, well, this will, go into the whole part 3 of it all. But the reason I would compare it to it hits close to home for you, Rob. Like, you could have a good piece of food, but if you put seasoning on top of that, that turns from a good piece of food into an amazing piece of food.
You have so many analogies about what this is like. Why don't you just get them all out of the way now? It's a wedding. It's a piece of food. Do we have more right now?
These things are just gonna they come about naturally over the course of the podcast. I can't cram them all in early on.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna try think about. I'm gonna come up with an analogy by the end of this that is as off kilter as yours.
But Shannon, talk about your poll here, because you asked that question to the audience of what season should come next to Netflix, basically, right?
I said what season should people watch after Cagayan? Again, pretending that Heroes versus Villains never existed on Netflix, hoping people don't find it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a can of worms. It was a lot for my Twitter.
Okay. So this is what recommendation you should give people, not what should Netflix put on next.
This is I think this should be what Netflix should put on. Because I think what Shannon's poll is going to prove is, I think, like, what are some good, because you only gave 4 options, because I think we're trying to look for like HD era newbie seasons. Actually, let me open up this question first. Are any pre-HD seasons going to go onto Netflix?
Not now, I don't think. Like, and I have here that I don't see them going pre-20. Ironically, even though people might now be obsessed with like the Parvati story or whatever it is, I think that's a lot for these casual Netflix fans. It's like, it's not in HD, it's so old, it's not like to our 2020 viewing standards. In my what should Netflix add next, I have only post-20.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree, but that being said, it's a damn shame. Like, I think people can be such quality snobs, in my opinion, of like, I won't watch anything that's in SD. It's a step away from like, I won't watch anything that's in black and white. I won't watch anything that's in subtitles. Like, the show was still beautifully filmed and contained some of the most iconic stuff in there. I feel like just because you don't have a great shot of a bird doesn't mean that that should preclude you from watching a Survivor season.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to be realistic with all of this. Like when you're saying things I agree with, but I'm like, maybe I
Oh, no.
expect less of people than you
Well,
do. where I'm like,
here's one thing. If they feel like this is a profitable investment, Rob, you know that back in the day, Star Trek did an HD remaster of The Next Generation. Could Survivor do an HD remaster of its first 16 seasons?
Yeah. So from a technical perspective, Mike, and maybe you have some more insight into this. I don't know if it's possible. So that that from what I recall, we were not shooting film in Survivor the early days. We were shooting to video. I don't know necessarily if you can up-res that to a higher resolution in the way that you could if you are shooting that is something that is more cinematic, a la something like Star Trek Next Generation.
If only Mark Burnett pulled a Tommy Wiseau and put like a regular camera and an HD camera right next to each other and filmed every single season, then we wouldn't have this problem. Then we could have everything available in HD.
Yeah. So,
I do think we'll talk about it when we get into what should we recommend to people, because there's a lot of great pre-20 stuff there that I go to, but yeah, Netflix isn't. Yeah. I mean, I agree that there would be some great stuff there, but I don't think it's doing it.
So to speak to what you said earlier, Shanna, I do think that David versus Goliath would be a great pick for Netflix. I think that is, a no-brainer. I think that you have a great cast, fun season,
relatively like controversy-free.
A theme that makes sense.
It's funny. It's got big characters. They're characters as well that I think we need, because when I was going through what season should people watch, there's a lot of these characters will end up being really relevant. But for the modern seasons, we don't know yet who will be relevant. But just thinking ahead, if these people are jumping in from 41 when they start being all-star seasons, I'm sure a lot of people will be relevant from David versus Goliath as well. So it's right there and it's perfect. And it's the kind of thing where if they had turned on CBS on a Wednesday night, where the show has always been within the last couple of years, and saw a newbie season firing on all cylinders, it would have been David versus Goliath. So that to me is the no-brainer. That's modern. There's no disconnect. They've already watched Cagayan, so they understand idols and a bit of the modern game.
That's so interesting too, because if you include this in with Heroes versus Villains and Cagayan, all of these seasons have like themed tribe divisions. Right? Like that's an interesting way to introduce the show to somebody of like, oh, okay, they're going to not divide them up randomly. They're divided by certain facets.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I think if they're going to introduce another two of the two, the fourth I would go with would be Millennials versus Gen X, which I think is another, great modern season, great characters who have been and will be very relevant. It's funny. It's entertaining. It's fast paced. It's
dramatic.
It's not, and it's not super confusing. They're all, but like people will get it. So I think that if you would have come to me, if a TV network came to me and was like, not just Googling things and was like, what next to, I would definitely say 33 and 37.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would. And, I think if there was another spot, I personally love 32. I think that's another one that has like a giant group of characters, lots of big strategy, lots of comedy. I do wonder if, I was going to say if the controversial ending would take away from it, but I don't know how the controversial ending plays in 2020. Back in 2016 when like it was all anyone could talk about, maybe it's fine to put it up nowadays, but I do feel like that's another season from the 30s that could, and yet again, another season that has a theme around tribe divisions.
To me, it's a lot further back than the other two that we've recommended. But I think as well, like some of the issues with Ko Wrong is that it's like a little slow in parts, and there's like whole episodes dedicated to Medivacs, which is unfortunate. Some of that is compelling, and some of that is like Joe couldn't go to the bathroom. But if you're binging it, that might be a little better.
Like
so I think,
was.
Yeah. So that's in the mix. I want to talk about something that is so highly debated. I get so many notifications about this. We actually had a character from the season weigh in on a lot of this. Season 25 to me, Philippines, is something I would throw in the mix. It's a modern season. It's near Cagayan. The issue is it's technically a returnee season, but it's the only returnee season I personally would consider. I don't think it ruins that much. I think Scoopin falling in the fire is, maybe I'm naive, but cultural knowledge that people be like, oh yeah, I remember that happening. That was like news at the time. And I think it stands on its own with these returnees and is a great season.
Hindsight is a great moment.
Yeah, it's true.
Hindsight, it's like future karma.
Yeah, I think we've all looked back at the fire as being the good guy in that situation. But there's some storylines that you will immediately grip you, because I know the pre-merges often aren't the best. And for Heroes versus Villains and Cagayan, both incredible pre-merges. You can say the same thing about like the Matt Singh journey. So I think Philippines is in the mix for me probably after 33.
The Matt Singer, sure.
Yeah.
Shannon, tell me about this Twitter timeline that you're on with this member of, because your Twitter sounds much more exciting than my Twitter, where I recently got tagged in somebody's, hey, here's my ideal returnee season.
Oh no.
And I've been stuck in 3 days of notification hell. Oh no, not that person. Oh yeah, that's a good pick.
Has Netflix offered to filter it for you? I mean, has Twitter offered to filter it for you?
I think you should just like, could someone create a GIF of Rob yelling like, "Please untag me," and just reply with that every time someone accidentally tags you on this?
Hey, make up whatever cast you want. I don't need to be tagged, and especially, I wasn't even in the cast.
Wait, then why were you in it?
Because of my, I guess that I'm a person that should know about this cast.
Oh, so were they like, what do you think about this cast at Rob Cesternino, at Dalton Ross, et cetera, et cetera?
At tag every person that's in the cast also. Yeah. It's like, well, it's 16 are good, but not these two.
Well, no, okay. I put a poll which was like, what season should people watch next? It actually wasn't what should go on Netflix next, but we'll talk about it. One of the seasons I put in was Philippines, and that created a lot of debate, which Penna ended up weighing in on his trilogy.
Oh, what did he say?
Oh,
I could actually, I can't even quote Penna. Like,
better not be about my hat, Mike.
I'm sorry. Look, that's a little bit of a sore subject. It ended up doing pretty good. I actually ended up doing really well. Not to spoil that podcast too much, Jonathan. So you have nothing to quibble with, my friend.
I actually should get the tweet for you. Like, he's amazing. But he came in about, he talked about how he kept getting worse in Survivor. I don't know. Poor Penna.
He did that. He's had a V-shaped recovery.
Yeah, he went from 7th to like 14th back to 7th. So he's nothing but consistent. Yeah. So I mean, I listen. I'd be hard pressed to badmouth Survivor Philippines. I love Survivor Philippines. It will always be in my top 10 seasons. Yeah. But I would put forth the same exact argument you made about Heroes versus Villains, where I think the Russell Swan story is something that you enjoy much more knowing what happened the first time. And I think you miss out on the glory that is Jonathan Penner, because I do feel like this is like a big finale for the character of Jonathan Penner in this season. Now, to your point, it is not the entire hinge of it, but I do think it's a factor of it that could impede your enjoyment a lot more. So I would say if we have to put another returnee involved season on there, I would pick Philippines personally, but that's a big if.
I think you're being so precious about this, Mike.
Allow me to be precious. Allow me to be precious.
Yeah,
I've watched the series for 20 years. I deserve to be a little precious about things.
That's fun, but that you have a new person. Though. Yeah, that their enjoyment of Samoa is going to be, or you're saying they're not going to get enough out of Philippines, that they don't have appreciation for the returning players yet.
I'm not saying they're not going to get enough. I'm just saying they could get more.
Okay, it's 3 people of a cast of 18. Penna in isolation is wonderful. You will get Penna just from that experience. Scoopin, you don't need more out of him, and you know that he fell in the fire. And a YouTube Russell Swan Medivac from Samoa.
All right, so are we adding that to the list? You have to YouTube certain clips. You have to pull a Luke Toki.
Dude, don't they show in Philippines? They flash back to them getting Medivac. So you can get it.
How many baseball games of Jeff Kent's do I need to watch before the season so I can appreciate binge Jeff Kent's?
And you have to watch every episode of The Facts of Life, Rob, twice.
Yes. How many Facts of Life episodes?
It's like, honestly, to get such a great, mostly newbie season in the modern era, I don't think we can squander that. I think if they're asking for 4 seasons.
I mean, what?
4 seasons regular or different 4 seasons? So that's Shannon. We easily confuse 4 seasons around here in America.
Incredible reference for you, Rob. To go, yeah, I can't even say 4 seasons.
Exactly. No, well, listen, right. we already showed the season with the construction workers, so called, right?
Yeah, if they ask for 4 seasons, we might accidentally give the wrong thing. But if we can somehow get it right, I would be giving them the 4 that I put on my Twitter.
I would be fine giving Philippines given what Netflix already gave. Like they've already sort of broken that tinfoil off the bottle with heroes versus villains. Sure. You know what? If
we don't agree with that, so how can we not
if Micronesia was an HD, then let Chaos reign. Put Micronesia on there.
No. I don't care about the HD. You can't be like, no, we don't co-sign what they did with heroes versus villains.
The reason sounds like you're saying that you are.
No. Mike, this is why we needed to podcast this out. I need to explain. Heroes versus villains is 20 people. It ruins dozens of seasons. This is a mostly newbie cast with a couple of pre-jurors and Penna. Those are not the same thing. You're being way too precious about it. Rob, where's the mediation of this? I'm getting...
So, all right. So can I tell you a Survivor Philippines related aside that happened to me today?
Definitely.
So I tried to use I won't say its name because I don't want everybody's phones to go off, but a Apple enabled assistant on my phone. And I tried to tell it to call my friend Sam Moore today. And so my phone said to me, okay, calling RC Saint Amore. I was like, no, what are you doing? No.
She's still like sitting at home, still wearing her Miss Survivor sash. Like, Rob, you finally called.
Calling RC Saint Amore.
Oh my God. And did it go through? Or because I've done that before where you're driving and then it's like, and you're like, no, I actually can't even.
No.
So did she pick up?
I got out of
RC, I know it's been a tough season for you, but should Survivor Philippines be on Netflix?
Yeah, we want you to weigh in on this hot talking point.
Yeah.
RC, do you think people need to have seen the Penna trilogy to understand Penna as a character? Please weigh in.
Yeah. So, should. Well, I could ask her about should they put the season on Netflix?
That's your go-to. If you ever accidentally call a Survivor, just ask them if they think their season should be on Netflix.
That's a great icebreaker of like, oh, how are you? Oh, also, should your season be on Netflix?
And if you ever find a Survivor player who thinks they shouldn't be on Netflix, tell me, because you won't.
Okay. Can I pitch you on another potential season for Netflix? Okay, what about
where are you going?
San Juan del Sur?
So I was potentially thinking about that as well. Because I think the issue with that is I think all the seasons that Shannon has suggested so far are pretty consistent from beginning to end. I do think San Juan del Sur has a little bit of a slow start. You know, you do have the fantastic stuff of like the John Rocker downfall and the Drew Christie downfall, but I do feel like outside of that, it's a little bit slow comings. And then once it hits that merge, then it really does something fun. I feel like the pre-merge is fine. It's not like Karamoan levels bad. But I could also see this as like a good, solid season to put on Netflix.
Yeah, and it leads people again to some historical relevance, some characters that are going to be very important. You know, Jeremy, Keith, Kelly, etc.
Yeah,
challenge on Netflix.
People will have a fun moment of pointing to Kelly Wentworth and being like, "Hey, pay attention to this fifth boot. She's going to be real important later on."
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Mike that my issue is I think what we're trying to find is great pre-merges, and that's the reason I would put Philippines third. Is that it's just like that's such a wonderful self-contained storyline in the pre-merge, and like these are new viewers. We like don't turn it off just yet. You know, Netflix, like, are you still watching? And we want to make sure they're still watching. So yeah, we're getting to that one also if we're doing the post-20s. We'll talk about it, but there's so many other great seasons. I mean, would you go slightly pre-20? Would you go to like a Token Teens, which I'm pretty sure is in HD?
Yeah, Token Teens is in HD. I think that would be a really fun choice too, because I think that's a very like. It's also like has a little bit of that old school flavor as well. If people are like, wow, this is a little too ridiculous. Like, well, here are two idols that don't get used. And here's Exile Island. It has some very, very big characters, I think. And Coach was also used pretty minimally actually in season 20 in retrospect. That it's like, hey, if you like at the taste of this guy, here's the entire meal of him. That is season 18.
Well, that's true. I mean, if you were interested in Tyson and Coach and JT, there's a lot there.
Yeah, hey, do you want to see JT not screw up?
People will be so confused. JT will look like he had such an ascent if they watched Heroes versus Villains first, and then they watch Token Teens. He's like really improved.
Machete order.
Yeah, I think
JT seasons backwards and watch him get better at Survivor.
He just keeps improving. I think with Token Teens, like I recommend Token Teens as a first to a lot of people. Because I've recommended, we'll talk about recommending, but I've recommended a lot of Survivor to people in my life because being friends with me, they were like, guess we got to check out Survivor. I've converted, like many super fans, a lot of new fans to the show. And also when Australian Survivor started, a lot of people were like, this is fun. Where do I go in the US? So I'm often like, what do you like? Do you want hyper strategy? I send them to Cagayan. Do you want character? Then I send them to token teams, because it's strategically, it's not like a hyper strategic season, but it's got character, it's got humor. It's very much just like an entertaining product. So yeah, I think that could be good. And it's only slightly before 20 in terms of quality and era.
Yeah.
So
I would put that on the same level as Sam on those sort of like just a very good, solid season overall. Like Shannon said, there are a few moments that pop, like the Tyson blindside in particular, but you're not looking for like huge moments outside of everything coach related. But I think it's a very grounded season for a number of reasons.
There's a lot of ways they can go. Do you think Netflix will be reaching out to us? Or just
they just need to
Googling
listen
podcast?
to this. Just listen to the first 40 minutes of this podcast. Netflix.
People from Netflix, hello and welcome.
Yeah. Do they have a Google alert for Netflix?
All right, well, just Netflix. I'm just going to say it many times to make sure that the robot
Good
gets it.
SEO. It's good.
Good answer.
All right, I think that's it. I don't know if we have more for what Netflix.
No, I think. I mean, let me just say that this, for many reasons, I am so glad this happened. It brings new lives to the show. And actually, before we move on, because Shannon, I know you wanted to talk about how this might bear out with. Obviously, we're in a limbo right now. The world is, but I know that Survivor obviously has not yet filmed season 41. Do you think that the burgeoning of a fan base on Netflix is going to affect the way they approach the season at all?
I think everything should affect, how 41 goes. And I think that 41 is going to be the most crucial season in the history of the show. I feel that strongly about it, because I feel like it's Survivor could have ended after season 40. All winners. It's kind of like a natural ending point for the show. There's been obviously some ugly stuff happening in recent years with the show. Could that have been the end of it? Could we have just kind of called it a day on a really great season? And they haven't. They've renewed it, which is amazing. But this is undoubtedly a new era. We've had this huge, long off season, not, because we wanted to, but we do have it. We've made some changes in the off season, some calls for diversity that are going to make the show that much better. And now we have all these new fans and all these new like celebrities that are, showing it to their fans and hopefully kind of spreading it. So I feel that this needs to be a great, well-cast, simply themed newbie season. I'm hoping for like a Cagayan level amazing season where these people will jump in for the first time live, and I hope it's amazing. And I don't want to be too controversial, but when I was kind of thinking about 41, I was thinking, is this where Jeff should pass the baton? Thoughts on that? Is that relevant? Because it's a new era. And I think that what's always been, to me, the biggest fear I have about the show ending is when Jeff jumps out, is that the end of the show? Do people think it can't go on without Jeff? Which is something I don't agree on.
Which case, look to outside the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
That formula is alive and well.
Exactly. I don't think it depends on Jeff, but I think a lot of people do, and that's always been my concern. Survivor is coming back for 41. It's coming back with a vengeance. It's coming back possibly bigger and better than ever. Should Jeff be passing the baton in the season for the new era of the show, and then we'll never have that fear of the show will end with Jeff because we will have passed it on in an organic and relevant way?
I believe that if Jeff Probst only feels like, well, I've got like a year or two left and then I'm going to retire from the show, then I think that they should make that switch now as opposed to
start the transition process.
There never will be a better time to make the switch. I don't get the sense that is something that Jeff wants to do.
How many years does he have left, though?
I don't know. 5?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, look at how long. Like, I don't want to call like Survivor an out-and-out game show, but look how long game show hosts have stayed behind the microphone. If they feel like it's a good gig, and especially in the case of Jeff, if he feels personally committed to like engaging in the product, which obviously his role has grown over the course, I think it might be tougher to do. I mean, to sort of answer your thing, I think to move forward, honestly, the best course might be to look back. To take a look at like, here are some of our best seasons. What do they have in common? Hopefully don't look at the things of like, oh, it was the idol nullifier that saved David versus Goliath. Don't pay attention to those moments, but more so look at like, what are the common trends and orient things around that, because Survivor is a proven formula. You don't need to reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah. And I think that really the issues that, Jeff Probst is a phenomenal host of Survivor. I think there's not a ton to quibble with Jeff Probst hosting. Sure, there's times when he could ask better questions in the tribal council. I think
And he talks really weirdly about like lotions at spas.
But overall, the hosting is fine. I think it's a lot of the creative decisions that I think we've quibbled with over the years, and I feel like that this long layoff, they've never had a period where they're not making the show for a year. And I'd have to go back and take a look of the layoff between Survivor Karamoan and Survivor Blood versus Water was also at a lengthy layoff. We'd have to take a look at that. But it's almost kind of like a band that sort of is just like go, 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 like churning out like stuff. And the music, can become, derivative and they can't have another hit. But sometimes when the band, goes away for a while, they're able to sort of like refine the creative. And maybe you hope that's where Survivor comes back a little bit more inspired, a little bit more of like, oh, yes, these are the stories we're trying to tell, as opposed to like, how do we just keep making this thing crazier and crazier and crazier and trying to get louder and louder so we can keep getting attention to this show, as opposed to what is the story that we're trying to show to our millions of fans who have stayed with us over the years.
Now, the interesting thing is, could there be an effect? Obviously, casting has drawn a lot of news given the recent diversity standards put in. But this almost might be the equivalent of, we talk all the time about like what seasons are shown to people in Sequester before they go out to Survivor. If these are the two most popular seasons of Survivor right now, which I would say that they are in terms of just how much they're being consumed, could this either inform the casting or the play style for people to be inspired by contestants on Heroes versus Villains or Cagayan?
Yeah, I mean that would be a good thing. I mean, one of the most prominent characters on Australian Survivor, not to spoil, had only seen the highlights of Tony on YouTube and is one of the best characters ever. So I think that's a good thing. There's a lot of people that you would want people to emulate from those two seasons if that's what they have.
That being said, I would think it's very unlikely that we're going to see people who were cast for Survivor 41 and 42. The application process started very long ago. I think there was a cast that was selected for Survivor 41 as of March of this year. So I don't think that there's going to be people. Maybe there will be new fans, Survivor 43, Survivor 44, who end up falling in love with the show because they found it on Netflix. But I don't think that we're going to be seeing any players in these next couple of seasons who were sort of like, oh, I was scrolling through Netflix one day. I found this show Survivor and I was hooked. Next thing I know, 2 months later, I'm here.
Yeah, we're definitely getting that confessional at a point, though, I feel. It's like, wow, I just found this on Netflix. I am cautiously optimistic, I want to say, about the direction of the show. The fact that they have put in the diversity standards, which I think would be great for casting. The fact that they have said, like, okay, we've listened, we won't do Edge of Extinction. Like they are listening and they have a lot of time to listen. So I think that in terms of like common denominators of what they should be looking back to try and emulate, it's all casting. If they can just get like a Cagayan level cast, I know that's the gold standard, but get it for 41, that they can tell these amazing stories. I hope that's what they can do. And I just want to clarify, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with Jeff as a host. Like, I think he is a great host of the show. Only just my deepest fear is the constant comments from people that are like, once Jeff goes, it's over. Yeah. And I don't think that is something that needs to happen. And it's concerning. It's like, what if, because we know it's continuing on to 41. What if he does do another 5 years, ends at 50, and then we don't continue? I just want to make sure we can continue past Jeff.
I think that the continued distribution of Survivor on CBS All Access, on Netflix, like I think that as Survivor continues to prove its worth as a cash creator for whoever owns the license to it, I think that even if Jeff wanted to walk away, I think there might have been a point where when Jeff wants to leave, the lights go out. I think that there probably would be enough parties invested in keeping this thing going that they would find. And yeah, there might be people on Twitter that say, hey, I'm out if Jeff's out. But I think that when push comes to shove, as long as the new host is not a disaster, I do think that people would stay with the show.
And let me go as far as to say, I mean, first of all, we saw this sort of with Dancing with the Stars this past season, where there were certainly people that were like, Tom Bergeron's out, I'm out. But I do think that like whether it was the Tyra effect or people just invested in the show, they still hung in there. I'm going to be so bold as to say, if indeed the show, either Jeff leaves or the show leaves Survivor, or it's one and the same, I could see within maybe 2 to 3 years afterwards, Netflix revives it and creates its own version.
Yeah. Netflix,
I mean, I don't know how that would get in with rights and everything, but I could very easily, especially now that it's sort of served as like an eye drawer and that it's proven to be a successful show for Netflix. You know, they've gone forward with doing things like acquiring the Great British Baking Show and airing it simultaneously. I would not be surprised if they're like, okay, CBS, you don't want Survivor anymore? Great, we'll take it. We'll start working with it. We're fine. We've got the Netflix money.
I feel so optimistic now that you've said all these things. Like, I feel like Survivor will never die.
Well, there's so many other players, not just Netflix, Apple TV, that there are, other streaming platforms that would probably be looking for a proven hit. So if the point ever comes where, CBS decides that they want to be out of the Survivor game, I mean, look what happened with American Idol, where Fox ended up walking away from it and ABC picked it up.
2 years later, yeah.
Is that something is that where we want the show to go? Like, I think ideally want it to stay on CBS, like kind of keep the momentum rather than like having it like struggle between networks to get like some sort of lifeblood back into it. But yes, if it gets canceled, I'm glad there are some other options for it.
Yeah, and then Shannon, you experienced this firsthand with Australian Survivor, right? Like, I don't believe it was made by Channel 10 in its first 2 seasons. And then when it came back, new network, sort of new format to it.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much a different show. Like, that was decades later. Like, I don't want to have 10 years without the show. It's been 8 months, and 7 months even. How much? 6 months even. And here we sit talking about Netflix phenomenon on this podcast. Like, we're dying over here, so we need the show.
Okay. All right. Are we ready for part 2?
Let's part 2 it up.
Yes.
Shannon, tell us about part 2.
Part 2 is a controversial one.
As
this whole podcast will be. I'm just waiting for the Twitter notification, filtering my notifications. But we want to talk about where should people either start if maybe they haven't even got into it on Netflix, or we can, assuming maybe they have watched Cagayan, where should they go next? There are no new seasons on Netflix. They'll have to seek it out themselves, but many are doing that.
Yeah, this is probably the most asked question with regards to Survivor discourse in the past 3 weeks has been like, I love these 2 seasons. What should I watch next? And that's where we are right now.
I know that there you are, many years away from having this kind of talk with Asher, but with the birds and the bees, you gotta you have that talk with your kids, or they're gonna have that talk from somebody else. You want it to come from you.
Wow, even I was confused about where that analogy came from with the birds and the bees, but I'm here for it. I think it's sort of like,
you want your friend learning about Survivor on the streets.
Exactly. Like I don't want them corresponding with any sort of chart they find on the internet. They need to come straight from the horse's mouth. There, frankly, I would be insulted if my son's like, well, Dad, I looked up this chart online that said what season I should watch next. I'm like, I'm right here. Here. I look at the tattoo. You know how dedicated I am to this show.
You could ask me anything.
Like, I think that's what scares me about becoming a parent is like, you could walk into a kid's room one day and they're watching Edge of Extinction. You know what I'm saying? And like, I
learned it from watching you.
Yeah. And that terrifies me about becoming a parent. So I think that we have to, tell your kids, tell your friends, don't let your friends watch Game Changers is the mantra of this podcast.
Oh, Shannon, I think we know you're going to raise your child as a devout never-edger. So I think that's going to be banned in your household.
Can you imagine if I had a kid that loved Edge of Extinction? I would disown them.
That is the black sheep of the family.
What if my kid doesn't even like Survivor? Oh my God. Yeah. I don't want. Okay.
Rebel. Kids like to rebel against their parents.
Yeah, so you have to do reverse psychology of like, wow, what Survivor? What a bad show. Oh,
never Google me, but my God, yeah. You will find out this is my whole identity. Yeah. So I think the important thing about recommending seasons to friends is that the reason everyone disagrees is because it's entirely subjective. And I think the best way to recommend is to know that your source, you need to personalize it for your source. As I said, I've started people on different things. Do I think that they can go old school? They can handle that? Do I think they're hyper strategy, hyper character? What are they interested in? And also, we have our own subjective taste. Like, I know something I've never in my entire life, nor will I ever recommend Survivor Gabon. I don't like this season, but I know that it's a polarizing season that other people would recommend. I know it's something possibly the people in my life probably not, but maybe some of them could have enjoyed it, but they'll never watch it because I never recommended it. So we are inherently subjective. Their taste is subjective. We're trying to find a point in that. So I think when you're recommending to friends, do remember that within the objectivity, you're trying to personalize it to their and your own taste.
Which again sort of invalidates those celebrities now that are like, what should I watch next? Unless you're really familiar with the work of Keke Palmer and her personality, it might be tough to hone in on what season matches that personality type.
Yes. I didn't know who Keke Palmer was before she became a Survivor fan. Now I'm a fan of her. I'm a fan that she's a fan. But I agree, like, it's hard to be recommending things en masse because it should be really tailored to each person. So I've kind of got like a few options, but they're very much like, if you blank, if you think this about your friend, like, for example, if you have faith in your friend that to do this right, and you think they're going to be a huge Survivor fan, and they haven't watched anything on Netflix even, or maybe if they've watched a Cagayan, you want to, hopefully just Cagayan, not Heroes versus Villains, but you want to start them, I think, on Pearl Islands. Like, to me, that if you really think someone's going to be into it, to me, that's the perfect season. There's no whiplash really to go back to Borneo. It's still old school if you think they can go back after. It's such a great season. The characters are going to be so relevant. It's still so entertaining. It's still so iconic. Like, if you want to just say, hey, check out Survivor, give them Pearl Islands, they'll love it, and then send them back to the beginning.
Yeah,
so I mean, go from 7 and then they go to 1?
We'll talk about the viewing order.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that. There's,
Okay.
I think Shannon and I, as much as we might have framed this as the great debate, I think we sort of found a compromise incidentally through our discourse that we're going to sort of give as our final point here. But I mean, I can speak firsthand that I think Pearl Islands is a great season to recommend. It was the first season I ever got on DVD, and when my lovely wife Angela found out that I like Survivor, and she's like, I want to watch more of this, I gave her that Survivor Pearl Islands DVD, and I said, this is going to be a pretty damn good place to start.
Yeah.
And Pearl Islands was the first season I ever watched, and here I sit, and as I've said, Survivor is my whole identity, so it must work.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead, Rob.
I was gonna say, well, I think that we're like really like cracking something in terms of like that it is not a season where the tribes have a theme, but the season has a strong theme, and that is one of pirates.
What is the story?
Yeah. And I just think that it is something that puts a framework around a season, which like helps, I think, just make it an easier thing to sort of process instead of it's just here are some random people.
Yeah, the only point I would have against starting with Pearl Islands is the advent of the outcasts, because it might be a thing of like, oh, wait, people come back and you're like, yeah, sometimes, but not all the time. That's the only one little blip that makes that season strange. But I mean, look, there's a reason why
Andrew Savage agrees.
Yeah, there's going to be a reason why Survivor Pearl Islands will always and has always been my favorite Survivor season of all time, because it really is that fantastic mixture of theming, like you said, Rob, and the challenges are really fun in that regard. Strategy, character, entertainment, just unqualified entertainment throughout those 14 episodes. And so I do think that's a really, as long as people are fine with the SD quality, then that's a great place to start, people.
Well, and I agree what you're saying. So I think what we're looking at, theme can be really important. It kind of just like roots everyone into this story. The second is great cast. A lot of the seasons we recommend, we just think have these like great characters people will connect with. And I think as well, what I've mentioned, great pre-merges. And the one thing that's amazing about Pearl Islands, if the first episode people are watching is that marooning where people are jumping in their suits and Rupert stealing shoes, like it's iconic from minute one. So they don't have to wait a couple of episodes or a few episodes, kind of like Cagayan as well. So I definitely think Pearl Islands, it's for the friends you have faith in, and pump them up a little bit about it. You know, be like, hey, I wouldn't recommend this to everyone, but I have faith in you.
I like that.
Smart.
You look like a worldly person. Can I interest you in a pirate season?
You look like someone who has so little of a life that you may binge 40 seasons of this show. As such, this is a good starting point for this. Other people, they want the HD. You don't need HD. You're better than that. You are HD.
Yeah, you see through HD.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good option, Pearl Islands. We've talked about a lot of the other ones, but Token Teens, as I've said, I give to all the people who I feel like you're gonna love character. You're gonna love the duality of Stephen and JT. You know, kind of you're gonna enjoy the part of the show that is dropping people from all walks of life that would never have otherwise met, and seeing how these personalities clash without it needing to be like a Borneo. And a lot of people that I've recommended Choking Teens to first are now super fans. So the system works.
Do a lot of people, like, if we do this wrong, like we hear the success stories, Mike, have you ever like heard a horror story of somebody who sort of like gets onboarded the wrong way and then ends up where it doesn't go well?
Yeah, so this is a little bit of the discourse that Shannon and I had. Is I think Shannon has been the way she approaches things is like to be a little cautious about not necessarily like offloading 40 seasons onto someone. But it is interesting where, to your point, and again, this is talking about the circles that we run in. I personally haven't experienced anyone who's like, I'll watch 20, but certainly not all 40. I do think it's one of those things where, yes, you might have to be a bit different in your approach instead of just being like, yeah, you're going to have to get through 40 seasons where it's 14 episodes a piece. Good luck. But I do feel like you sort of get in for a penny, in for a pound, at least after watching a few seasons. Like I can't, especially if you are sort of bouncing around in the way that we're talking about now, I can't really think at a level where you're like, well, I guess I'm going to call it quits here at 31 seasons. I don't need to watch the other 9.
And here is the crux of our debate, Mike, because that's all that people do. That, like, every person I've introduced the show to has watched like the best 20 to 30 seasons, but not all 40.
Right.
You think every single person who watches the highlights of the show watches all 40 seasons? Do you think they watch Thailand? None of these people have watched Thailand.
Well, I think what's cool about Survivor, as opposed to some of these other shows that have like a really long episode catalog, say like if you're watching like The Walking Dead, like you can't recommend like watch season 4, then watch season 7. But with Survivor, you could watch like 2 or 3 episodes of a season. Like, I don't like this one. Like, let me start a new one.
Well, Mike, that is what Mike is going to recommend.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I think we can help people out with that, being like, you just won't like it. You don't need to watch 2 episodes. We're telling you you're not going to like Thailand. Don't dive in. And we'll talk about that. But Mike, I completely disagree that people are like, well, I've watched 20, might as well watch all 40. That's 20 other seasons. That's like hundreds of hours. People don't do that.
But
people
I will also say that
what
what might not help, what might, stop people from keep watching is I do feel like when you bounce around, you inevitably follow this trail of starting with the top tier seasons, moving down to the great seasons, then the good seasons, then the below average seasons, and then finishing with like the bottom of the barrel. And so, yeah, there might be a chance that people drop off because you say, well, you watch pretty much all the good ones. And now that's what's left. You could finish to
just
40,
don't watch them.
But what's left is not going to be great.
All right, so this is interesting, Mike. So what I'm seeing, what you're talking about, is almost like a Survivor season. Would you say, is it a pyramid, and is the top of the pyramid a point of the best, and at the bottom is like all of the crap seasons, or is it that, or is it like there's a crap seasons at the very bottom? Maybe we should list them.
We will in the course of this podcast.
Yeah, is it more of like an upside down triangle where?
Yeah, I would say like, because I do think, so we can even go into this because Shannon and I talked about this beforehand. Like there is like, in Shannon's opinion, like you think like a 4 hierarchical structure, essentially like based on quote unquote quality of the season. And yeah, I do think that whatever shape you want to give it, and I'll admit, I have firsthand experience with this because this is how I sort of introduced my wife to it. Was she kept asking like, what season should I watch next? And just like instinctually, I said, okay, let's like watch all these really great seasons. This will really excite you. And then as you're running out of freeway, you're like, okay, well, I guess you'll enjoy these seasons. And eventually you're like, yeah, you might want to stop here because I don't think you're going to like the rest of these. So I think there is sort of like whether intentional or not, when you pursue this method, there is sort of like a stratification of quality based on that.
Yeah, and we're kind of diverting now from the what season should we come next. We could probably touch on a couple more, but I think one of the reason that Mike and I have done this podcast and the debate that we were having was Mike feels you need to be watching 40 seasons from 1 to 40. And forgive me, Mike, correct me if I'm misquoting you on anything, and then if you're not enjoying it, tap out, Wikipedia, how it ended, keep going. And I just think it's unrealistic to say to someone who watched 1 season or 2 seasons on Netflix, it's like, okay, we'll go back to the beginning and have this like monitored 40 season rewatch where if you're not enjoying it, like you'll skip forward. Like that sounds like really involved. And I truly don't think most people who become absolute super fans who will end up being RHAP listeners who will jump in at 41, will watch all 40 seasons. Like I consider a lot of my friends super fans. They are, you know, they listen to the podcast, they've seen most of the seasons, but there's like 10 or so seasons they're never going to watch, because why would they jump back to these like terrible, irrelevant seasons that they have the good fortune of never having to watch?
Well, I don't know. They could have enjoyed it, you know, because they haven't been granted the opportunity.
So
they weren't
Shannon,
going to enjoy some of these seasons.
At what point do you want to sort of like put out like the order of, okay, watch this, watch this, watch this, and then at the point where the person's like, oh my God, I love it. Then you say, okay, now you're ready. Now go back to 1.
It's 2, maximum 3 seasons. I think we would agree on that. That you start people off with where we've talked about these starting points.
You got to like Hansel and Gretel them until they get back.
But
to
not
like, oh, welcome to my candy house.
But not too. Like I think you're giving them. Yes, you're giving them. If you think Pearl Islands, Tocantins, Cagayan, Philippines, possibly 33, 37. China's a good one. People often go to. They watch 2 or 3 of those seasons. Then we go back to a level/pyramid system, and so the pyramid system means that you would create levels, and then you and your friend would ascertain what level are they at. And this is what I did for all my loved ones that I got into the show like 5 years ago. I color coded all the seasons from what I thought were the worst, okay, good, and you have to watch it, amazing season, right? And they could kind of work out, okay, I'm about like a level 2, like I like the good seasons, or I'm a level 3, like I can do like the mediocre seasons, or I'll watch all of them. That's how committed I am to this. And they went in order chronologically. So they got large, broad parts of the evolution. They weren't jumping around, but someone was there to tell them, skip this season if you're not that into the, if you don't want to watch the bottom of the barrel because it's really bad.
Shannon, have you shared your chart anywhere?
I sent like a really rudimentary old version to Mike that I like dug up from 2016. I don't know if I would even agree with 2016 Shannon's takes completely.
It's very well done.
It wasn't. I mean, it was color coded, and then I color coded it for this podcast, and then I printed it, and we don't have a color printer, so it's just like if there's a video, you can. It doesn't really make sense. But I have color coded all the seasons based on my subjective understanding of what level they should be in, based on like historical relevance, pure quality. How much do they hold up now? And anyone could tailor this system to their own taste and to their friends' taste. I don't think we should be talking about Taylor lately.
So. Listen, it might be on Netflix soon.
Yes.
Yeah, and it should be.
Shannon, will you share these levels with us here today, or do you want people to then contact you?
No. I'm happy to share.
Yeah, I think this is a great example to go off of.
Okay, we'll do the levels. I mean, Mike, before we do, are there any other starting seasons that we haven't touched on that people...
I think you just mentioned it, but I think China is one that I actually, more than Tocantins, I think China is a big one, because I think that was also very distinctive in the actual time of the show of like really focusing back on, to your point with Tocantins, the people from various walks of life. Like I remember Jeff Probst introducing like the occupation of every one of the 16 contestants. It also went back to 16 contestants for the first time in a little while after we had these big casts of 20 and 19 people. We had like one swap, few idols. That's another one that goes back to theme with really harkening back to the art of war of it all. And I think it's a very solid cast and like pretty good with strategy overall. I think Todd is hailed as one of the best strategists out there. And then you have fun characters like Courtney and James as well. Like it's a very solid, good season. If you're good with standard definition, I think that's another great starter to recommend as well.
Yeah, I mean, that to me comes close to Tocantins, and I just end up, I think, recommending Tocantins, maybe just due to, like, again, subjective taste. But they're both really good.
What if I were to recommend a season that a current person on the podcast was a part of? Because I know that a lot in our
Survivor All-Stars.
Yep, exactly. Like, oh, you know what? Listen, you watch Heroes versus Villains. Just start from that point here. No, when we'll get into the opinion I put out there later. A lot of people said that when they tell people to start off, they have them actually start off with not Pearl Islands but Amazon.
Yeah, and that to me would be the only other early era season other than Pearl Islands that I would recommend. I mean, look, it's a little dated, but it's really fun and really funny. The reason I'd go Pearl Islands, no offense, Rob. Oh, this is about to be so offensive. Pearl Islands ends up being a little more character relevant for the history of the show just in terms of like Sandra and family. Rob comes back, but like.
Wait. I'm highly offended. What do you mean that that so many people from the Amazon came back and played?
Yeah, and I'm just saying that like the people who came back, like in Pearl Islands, they ended up winning or going quite far, and it's not important. The point is that for the Amazon, it's a great standalone season. But the crazy thing about the Amazon is like it barely ever gets spoiled. Like people can watch a lot of other seasons and go back to the Amazon without having it been spoiled, if they want to jump around a little bit. But I think it's a really fun one. And I also think like we're hoping to convert people to RHAP listeners, right? So they're going to have to get into it eventually.
That's true as well of like, hey, if you like this guy, here's it.
Series?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And I've seen Mateo and Butch's two-headed podcast team.
Yeah, although I have said for 10 years, much better to let people think that this is Boston Rob as a podcast. Like, boy, Boston Rob really let himself go. What is he? Okay, that we'll go with it.
Oh, that's interesting. So do you suggest like a guerrilla marketing tactic when people are talking about how much they enjoyed Boston Rob in watching Heroes versus Villains on Netflix? You could be like, well, he does have a podcast.
Yeah.
Check this out.
That's
I'm
great.
allowed to do that.
And then once they're in, like they may have gotten tricked, but then once they're listening, like, you know what, this might not be the Boston Rob.
Yeah, it's
but
the
like,
catfish strategy.
But I'm liking this. Yeah.
Sure.
Catfish the listeners? I don't think we need to do that. I think we can stand on our own merit. I'm sorry if I've really taken your confidence down by what I've said about the relevance of the Amazon in future seasons. But Rob, people will listen for you.
I hope so.
I
I am really interested in the idea of, we said it with JT, but I wonder if you watch Survivor All-Stars and then watch Survivor Amazon. I feel like that maybe it's like, boy, this guy's finally getting it.
Yeah, or I mean, you can say that about a lot of All-Stars. They'd be like, wow, okay, wow, Tina's actually doing really well in this one. Like now, I don't know how she got voted off first in All-Stars.
I'm like the Kelly Wentworth of Survivor All-Stars. Like, boy, give this guy another shot.
I think as well, then people will be watching your season and you'll probably be getting messages. Rob, I know that I watched Survivor Amazon for the first time in 2013 probably. And I feel like I messaged you after and I never got a response, but I messaged being like, I loved you on Survivor the Amazon, which I just watched.
Yeah. It's a mixed bag when people watch Survivor the Amazon in 2020. I get lots. I get lots of Twitter mentions of it's that for me. I'm fine. Don't put it on Netflix. Come Google Survivor, find the podcast. But I don't love it when I get a message from, hey, I just watched Survivor the Amazon today, and I hate you.
How dare you make? How dare you say this thing?
The statute of limitations on that tweet is over.
Yeah, how dare you say this thing 17 years ago?
Like, I just watched this thing that happened 17 years ago, and I'm mad at you today.
Rob, you can win that argument so easy. This person is going back and rewatching Survivor. If they tell you they hate you, just send them a list of the winners.
Oh yeah, okay. pull the whole Tyson strategy, right? Of like just follow up with a spoiler.
Exactly. Like they're probably going to Pearl Islands next. Spoil them.
Yeah.
Or turn them off of Survivor by being like, oh, well, bad news. I'm on every season from now on.
Oh, yeah.
I'm on 6 seasons. I marry Amber.
Yeah.
Pretty much the main character of this franchise.
That's good. Yeah. Because, I mean, to the viewer, like it's happening in real time.
Right. Exactly. Like, it's like, wow, I can't. And I mean, listen, there's an entire different discussion about like discourse between community and contestants as well. How sometimes they regard contestants as like characters on a TV show rather than people. So
yeah, because here's the thing, the nice thing about playing Survivor, pre-Twitter, pre-Instagram, that people did not really have a way to directly contact you with their negative feedback. And now all of a sudden you put old seasons on, and now people are lots of ways to directly contact you and tell you that they were not happy with the decisions you made.
But what's the split of people who enjoy you on the season? It's got to be like 95-5.
It varies.
It varies. I think again, a lot of stuff discussed in Survivor the Amazon does not necessarily fit a great 2020 lens.
Yeah, I didn't have as nuanced of a opinion on gender roles in 2002.
Yeah, I mean, but like honestly, if anyone's coming from like Love Island or what, like that season is most like that. I think. So maybe people
is that part of your flow chart, Shannon? Like, love The Bachelor, you're gonna love Survivor the Amazon.
love The Bachelor, you'll love All Stars. Love something like Love Island, you'll love the Amazon. But the thing, something like All Stars, it's like, it's like you're wearing a dress that you quite like, but it doesn't really fit.
That's your analogy, Shannon. You got it.
Yes, nailed it.
Past hour, I'm like, I'm wearing a dress. It's like a dress.
You're like the Brick Hamlin of like, it's Survivor's like window. There's light pouring through.
It's like if there's a door, but it's not quite open.
Yes.
If there are lights on, but they're kind of dimmed. Okay, I think I can get this.
We have to talk through your levels here, because I'm really excited to hear about this, because you've updated it to represent all 40, right?
And it was easier at the time because this was around when Australian Survivor was it was early 30s that people were really getting into the show. And I actually did have a horror story. I have a horror story.
Ooh. Okay. Australian horror story.
No, not about Australian, but so many of my friends watch Survivor now because of me, right?
Yes.
One of my friends was like, I feel so out that all you guys watch Survivor. I want to watch it. So we had like a really big viewing party for the Game Changers premiere. I had a friend come over. He watched it. It was his first ever episode of Survivor. He's never watched another episode again.
Wow.
So, and why would he? Because if it was the Cagayan premiere, he'd be a super fan. So actually thinking about it, I do have a horror story. So we really do need to be careful. But
the 2-hour Game Changers premiere was that bad?
The 500th episode of Survivor.
Because I feel like that, of Game Changers episodes, it could have been worse.
It could have been worse, but he didn't know any of these people. It wasn't particularly amazing. Like Heroes vs. Villains is still like an incredible episode.
What are you talking about? Spy Bunker.
He didn't know who Tony was. Like it wasn't.
A man buried himself in a hole and covered it with leaves.
But that was not the top story of the 2 hours, though.
But also, so he was there with all these super fans who were like distraught afterwards. They were like in the fetal position that Tony had been voted out, and he was very confused. And he's never watched another episode even. So we have to be careful. But yeah, at the time it was the early 30s, which did make it easier because I put a lot of these recent seasons on the worst level because they've been bad. But the level system is a personal thing. And I feel like I'm going to get some mentions because it's basically a season ranking with a little bit of variance for like historical relevance. Again, if you don't like my level system, that's okay. You can change some of the seasons, but I think we want to maintain the level system. Recommend your friends, go from the beginning, find out where they sit, put themselves in a level, and then watch that level's worth of seasons, right?
Okay. All right.
So much trepidation.
All right. So this is on the forget you, go home, goodbye level.
Well, I think we should probably start with the top, right? Like the creme de la creme, the seasons you want to recommend, even for the people that are like, I'll watch a few. Like these are the ones you want to have that person watch.
Okay.
So I'm going back to my color-coded computer.
Mike, what's our top level?
Oh, that's worth playing for.
Worth playing for level.
And actually, we have the 4 tiers to correspond with our outwit, outplay, outlist tiers.
If level 1, if you have a friend who's like a little lazy, who's thinking, I will watch the highlights, but
this is like the Enneagram podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So
are you a 1?
We're not just tier ranking seasons, we're tier ranking people. Is your friend lazy? Is your friend someone who just wants the good stuff, not ready to see out the bad? Then they're at level 1, which is the absolute highlights. This is what I have in my level 1. Feel free to disagree, but don't at me too much, Twitter, please. I've got the Amazon for reasons we've discussed. It's fun. It's funny.
This is in chronological order, right?
Yes, in chronological order. So they'd start then at the Amazon. We want them to be RHAP listeners, Amazon. Pearl Islands, for reasons we've discussed. We've discussed most of these seasons. Then you go China, skipping all the way to China, Micronesia, Tocantins, Heroes versus Villains, Philippines, Blood versus Water, Cagayan, Cambodia, Millennials versus Gen X, David versus Goliath, and Winners at War. So I'm pretty sure
all the top tier.
That to me is the top tier.
That's more of a square,
okay,
Rob, not a pyramid.
I mean, I think it's like 13 seasons. I think I counted 13. Because all of those seasons are great seasons of television. Like if your friend can't get through those, then your friend doesn't like Survivor. Like that's the best of the best. I know I called them lazy, but I mean there's a level to
they just watched 13 seasons of television.
13 incredible seasons of television.
So now I know that there are some returnee seasons incorporated in there. It's like, is there like an asterisk where they can then like phone a friend to go back to you and be like, oh, who's this person? Like, what should I know about them before going in?
So for all my friends who were watching at the time, I would give them this leveled system, and then I would send them, before they got to the returnee seasons, complete rundowns of every returnee they hadn't seen. You want to know how I convert super fans? Like, I put a lot into this, and there's people listening to the podcast now, I'm sure.
You really curated them, yes.
Yeah, and they're super fans, like I'm telling you. So I would literally go, I'd be like, you've seen this person, you've seen one season of maybe this person. Here was how the second season went.
Like, let me fill in the history for you.
Yeah, so I mean, Micronesia's in that. That's the kind of
Blood
thing where,
versus water.
Yeah, like you have Micronesia, you would know like the people from China, you wouldn't know everyone. It stands on its own. It's kind of like if you're watching a TV and it's not perfect, perfect reception. So my analogy game is so strong right now.
Or you're hearing like every other word in a conversation. Like, you can sort of fill in some context clues.
Do you agree with any of my level 1 other than like the size of it?
No, I mean, I agree with most of your level 1. Personally, I don't think I'm as huge of a fan of Blood versus Water.
That was the one that was on the precipice.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great stuff there. And I think the concept of Blood versus Water almost kind of outweighs some of the execution of it. I do think there's a lot of great stuff in there, and it definitely superseded expectations at the time. So I could quibble with that. But otherwise, for the most part, like, I think these are all seasons we've talked about before as like pretty legendary in their own right.
Okay, Rob, any massive disagreements with my level system?
No, it's a good list. I mean, I feel like that if somebody is that far into the list, they are already a Survivor fan. You got them.
They're the laziest Survivor
fan. You got them on the line. Yeah.
I will say every single person that I recommended to watched all of these seasons. Obviously, some hadn't aired yet, and they've since then they started jumping in at like Game Changers, HHH. Like, it was a hard few years, but they watched all of these, and like, why wouldn't you? They're great seasons of television.
Do you quiz them and make sure they actually are watching the seasons, and that they're afraid of your intensity?
No, they message me like while they're watching. Okay. I can't believe this happened in episode 5 of season 7, and I'm like, I know, crazy with like the mutinies, and anyway, yeah. So I was involved in a lot of concurrent conversations about like decades old seasons at the time.
Okay.
So level 2. Level 2 is for your friends who want the very good seasons. It doesn't have to be the best of the best. If it has a little bit of low points, they can stick it out. Also, if they want like a lot of relevance, so maybe it's not the best season, but it will end up being more relevant for a future returnee season, get the reception a little better on that TV, make the dress fit better, know the people at the wedding a little bit more.
Yeah.
And this one honestly was a difficult one. I'm open to disagreements, but I got Borneo just because I'm like, okay, if you're that into it now that you're watching probably around 20 seasons, probably watch Borneo.
And to clarify, so it's going to be those 13 seasons in level 1 plus these seasons.
Exactly. Obviously, you have already passed level 1, but you're going in order. So you're watching Borneo, and I struggled with this, but I even think Australia, to me, it doesn't super hold up for 2020. It is really slow, but half the cast returns.
Yeah, and also if you're talking about strong pre-merges, Australia might have one of the strongest pre-merges of all time.
Yeah,
it drags a bit. The whole season drags. I mean, but I just think there's enough there that's going to be so relevant to you. Then you go past some of the green seasons. I mean, it's color-coded. You go past some of the level 1 seasons we've talked about. I always put Panama in level 2. To me, it's good enough that it's like one of those, like, it's just
I love funniest season of all time, Survivor Panama. Yeah. I'm always happy putting Exile. And that's another one, first appearance of Suri. Even someone like Terry, even though he's not going to play a huge role, like, was a big character at the time.
And then speaking of, then I would put Cook Islands on this level, again, due to the relevance of so many origin stories that are going to be significant, the poverty story and everything like that. I would then skip to Samoa, which I think is relevant enough just for Russell, and especially if they haven't watched Heroes versus Villains, definitely add some flavor to Heroes versus Villains that I think is important. San Juan del Sur for me is only level 2, just because I think quality-wise, I wouldn't put it quite at that like peak of peak, especially when I have so many seasons added, but it's going to be relevant as we've discussed. Ko Wrong, I've also put it level 2 from a quality perspective, and then all the level 1s that we discussed. So,
okay, I think that makes sense. I mean, I personally would put, it's not relevant. I've always had a soft spot in my heart for a season like Vanuatu, so I think like that's a solid one that could be put up there. That also has the returnee of someone like Eliza, who's going to play a big role in Survivor Micronesia. But again, it's your ranking, so I can understand.
These 2s and 3s are, somewhat
Negligible,
interchangeable.
yeah.
Yeah. This is My Life is Fine, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. This is the My Life is Fine of like good to average.
Mhm.
Yes. So level 3 is when you have a friend who's like, I want to watch a lot. I'm a really big fan, but I also have my self-worth. I'm not going to put my
Hershey bar tier.
Ain't no
Yeah.
Hershey bar, to quote a season that is controversially, according to Shannon, in the level 2 tier.
I'm never going to, I don't want to watch what you think is genuinely really bad, but I'll watch pretty much everything else. So for that, I have, again, all the level 1s and all the level 2s previously discussed. And then, this one's purple for my color coding system. Africa, Marquesas, All-Stars, I do think is level 4 bad, but is that relevant that I bumped it
Same.
up?
Yeah.
Yeah, so bad. Unless you're watching it out of order, Rob, going backwards. I put Vanuatu there. I put Vanuatu,
Sorry,
Anguilla,
Mike.
and Guatemala, just because I kind of feel like they're all the same to me quality-wise. Like,
yeah, and I also,
Sorry,
I
Jordan.
also didn't think that. I also forgot. I would personally put Marquesas up there as well. I mean, we'll talk more about how I do think that, like, that is the beginning of Boston Rob. That's the beginning of Kathy. That does feature like the first major flip in Survivor history, and I think it's a pretty entertaining season overall.
It's interesting that you've gone to these like Blood versus Water, and Marquez, like these are the ones that I kind of struggled with. I wouldn't query Marquez as being level 2 too much, especially because it does have that major flip. So just from an evolution perspective, it really is kind of key there. But I was like, I can't put all of these. Anyway, try to have a little bit of a line, but I don't query it at all. So yeah, those 4 in a row. Then I've got, again, like Karamoan, I put here. I don't really know why. It could be level 4, but I guess
it's sort of like the popularity of Malcolm. You get to see Cochran really become like a... Well, actually, it's interesting that you would put Cochran's winning before his first one, Yeah,
Cochran would love this list because people will only see him in Karamoa, and I'm sure he would appreciate that. Again, like I was just like, wow, they're skipping a lot of seasons. Maybe we should give them something else. And then Ghost Island as well. I was like, let's put something in the 30s. To me, it's like the best of a bad bunch of a lot of bad 30s seasons, other than like the better seasons we've talked about. So I was like, it's fun and it'll probably be relevant. Like Wendell's already come back. I'm sure like Dom and Kellen and some of these other characters will be relevant to the future of the show. Subjective, as I've said. So that's level 3. And to just finish it off, so if your friend...
forget you, goodbye.
Exactly. To quote a season that is in that bottom tier.
This to me is like, again, if everyone's going to watch all 40 seasons. So this is the most dedicated person.
Yeah,
well done
purely
to you.
for completionists only.
Yeah, so you've watched all the 3 levels. You're watching them in order, but you've also got to include what everyone else is leaving out, which is Thailand. Fiji I struggled with. It's such a bad pre-merge. I don't know if people will get past the pre-merge, even though I think the merge has some merit, some controversial merit, some good characters as well. So Fiji is on the precipice for me. Gabon, as I've said, subjective taste. Other people would have it high up in levels. I put it level 4. Nicaragua, Redemption Island, South Pacific, and One World. I put the whole Dark Ages into level 4. Worlds Apart, I put into level 4. Game Changers, which scared my friend off Survivor for eternity. HHH, Edge of Extinction, and Island of the Idols. These are the seasons I would feel ashamed to find my kid watching in their room in 20 years from now. So again, like these rankings are subjective, and I'm sure people disagree because it is my taste. But I think if you go with the level system, the important thing is to know your friend, judge them, and then give them a level.
Yeah, the levels are a little bit of like an hourglass shape.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Yeah, it's like a Black Widow, like from the Black Widow Brigade.
Exactly. There's like 13 top tier seasons, 13 bottom tier seasons, and the rest are sort of like intermingle with each other. It's almost like there could be like 3 levels almost if you really want to like.
This is the system, Mike. This is
color.
There's 4 colors.
All right, I'm sorry.
Green and yellow. There's purple.
Don't rock the boat, Mike.
I think I did say to Mike, I'm like, I'll try kind of get like 10 in each one, but like it didn't work out that way. So it's all very arbitrary and reductive. But I think that level system that's how I converted people a few years ago, and I think they would swear by it. And I can get some testimonials from them if you want.
So when you are, I'm intrigued because when you're sort of analyzing people to figure out like what seasons for them to watch next, are you looking at like specific facets, like whether they like the strategy, whether they like the humor, etc.? Are there specific buckets that you look at from what they enjoy from a season?
When I'm doing the level, like I look at that very much on a starting point basis. Like what do they enjoy? Like, humor, character, strategy. When I'm looking at what level I should give them, I'm very much just looking at how much they seem into the show. Like I had I thought I'd give my cousin this many seasons, and she seemed to really love it. So I was like, oh yeah, no, definitely watch Panama, definitely watch Samoa.
Yeah.
I started adding, this is how it started, because I started adding in seasons because I was like, you seem really into it. You can go further than I thought. So I just started kind of adding seasons.
And then that's an option as well, is that they don't need to stay on a level. They have the option of going down or possibly up, depending on like what they're enjoying or not enjoying.
They could disappoint you for sure.
Yeah. So I'm really intrigued by the two approaches. I do feel like that there's probably a greater success ratio with Shannon's approach, where she is going to really curtail the syllabus to the student, where that Mike is more like the professor who comes in with the syllabus. This is the way it's been. This is the way it's always been. That I don't care if you don't like the order. This is the order we're doing it.
There's also the option of like, if you don't like the assignment, you can skip it at any time. I'm loose like that.
Yeah, but they have to do their own homework. Like, you Wikipedia and see what happens there. Like, if I had a loved one who didn't like it, I'd be like, let me just tell you what happened.
You don't like the order these are in? Too bad. That's the order it was.
Yeah, maybe this is more. I'm like that parent of like, no, we're doing this way. Like you can't go off and do your own thing.
This is how we've always done it.
I'm like a helicopter parent. Like, I'm there every step of the way. They might be like, I'm not really enjoying Guatemala. I'd be like, no, you stick with it. Like, I think you can do it. So
interesting.
Yeah,
well, then let's get into part 3 here. Yeah, because
wasn't that part 3?
So Shannon has set up a very complicated, comprehensive, but very interesting system to break down the seasons. I'm going to take a big old Occam's razor to it, because mine is super simple. And again, what I will say is that I put this out initially. I will say I think my opinion has changed a bit, which is what we'll sort of move into with our final theory here, which I think sort of combines actually both approaches into a perfect hybrid. But my initial approach is pretty simple. If you want to get somebody into the show, start from season 1, move forward. Now, there are downsides that we're going to talk about, but my reasoning is 3-pronged. First, context. I think, and maybe I'm just saying this as a Survivor historian, but a lot of gameplay in seasons are informed by what happened before. And I think that really says something. Like, for instance, if you just pop in and view Marquesas without exactly knowing the fact that the first 3 seasons had dalliances of power, but nobody really had a big flip on the group in power, that makes it one of the most important moments in Survivor history, as you can say. Without that context, the enjoyment of it is much lessened. And again, like I said before, you can still enjoy these seasons, but to have knowledge of, well, they made a decision based on what came before it, that's a really nice flavor that can have you enjoy the series even more. The second thing is, going back to Shannon's point, the subjectivity of suggestion. Because here's the thing, you could suggest a list, but it is also your list. You can make it as objective as possible. If there is one thing we have found out about the Survivor fan community over 2 decades of fandom, is that people have a lot of different opinions about things.
Yeah, just look at this cast list that this person made, and I've gotten like 19 new mentions since this podcast started. People hate people on the list.
Yeah, so for all you know, you could be blacklisting a season that someone would actually come around and really enjoy. Or you could be recommending a top tier season and people are like, yeah, you know what? I'm just really not feeling Tony. Like this, I'm not sure if I like this. Yeah, so I think that the diversity of opinions across Survivor is my opinion, though, the reason why the show is still on today. And I think it's tough to sort of put that power in somebody's hands, because for all you know, you might be precluding seasons from people that they would enjoy, or make them watch seasons that they won't. And the third one is, as I talked about before, yeah, let's say you're watching a season and you don't like it. Great. Press pause, skip it, move on, enjoy your life. It's totally fine. You can, if you're curious, you can look up what happens and that'll inform, future seasons. But I'm not saying watch all seasons in order, watch every single episode. There will be seasons that will come up that you may not be a fan of, and you're totally fine to move on from that. I'm not saying that this is every single episode you must watch, but I do think that watching things in order just has a lot of additional benefits to it than maybe an approach of simply bouncing around seasons, which I know a lot of Shannon's list doesn't, but I know a lot of recommendation seasons are, okay, you want to watch 37, then you want to go back and watch 15, and then you want to, I think jumping through time too much, I don't want to Scott Bakula it. I want to keep it nice and simple.
Yeah.
I think we agree that jumping through time is something we both don't want. And that's why mine has also been chronological. Once we agree as well, start off with a couple, then go back to the beginning. We just disagree on how much you should be watching from the beginning. Yeah, because I mean, jumping around, people will get confused without context as well. It's like, where are the idols? What's happening here?
Exactly.
You do lose that evolution, that like basis to it that makes the whole viewing experience stronger. And I agree with you that watching 1 through 40 is the richest viewing experience. You will get things out of it. You will put a lot of time in sometimes to get small things out of it. I'm just trying to be realistic that I don't think it's what most people want to do. Not even what some people want to do. I don't think most people want to hear that it's a 40 season commitment, many seasons of which are not that good. And I think that like, if you're going to even like a level 2 of my system, you would get a lot of the context without like, especially if you're level 3, like if you're just leaving out like the really terrible seasons, I think you get pretty much all the context without like, again, is Thailand relevant to any context? Like you've still had the complete evolution of strategy in it. I've kept in all of the super relevant seasons that I don't even think are that good, like an All-Stars. You do have the subjectivity thing. As I've said, the Gabon factor, the fact that
you
other
have to
people...
see Xi'an in All-Stars.
You don't need to see Xi'an. Like you'll get it, Okay. I think like is the juice worth the squeeze in these things? Like, and the subjectivity thing, I totally agree with that. Some of these seasons I won't recommend. Other people might have enjoyed. Some things are better in retrospect. Something like a South Pacific I put in level 4. Some people get stuff out of that and it's enjoyable. So if he ends up coming back, but like, I just think that if you're going to say to someone 40 seasons, I think the vast majority of people are like, I just won't even bother. And I'm trying to get people to meet them on their level.
Maybe what you can do then is lie to them and say there's only 10 seasons of Survivor.
Oh.
And then after they watch the first 10, be like, I got a surprise for you. There's 10 more seasons. And then just keep feeding them that line until before they know it, they've watched all 40.
Between the two of you, with Rob wanting people to think Boston Rob owns his podcast and Mike lying to his friends about the scope of the series.
They're little tiny lies.
Exactly.
No.
This is like what Rob does on the 5 for 5, right? Like you miscount a little bit. You do some
It's like Bazinga got you.
Value the people in your life. Do not gaslight them.
The big downside that I have to this approach that people were very vocal to point out is
God from Twitter.
Starting from Borneo is tough. Borneo, whatever you feel about the season, is admittedly extremely different from the rest of the series. There are still tenets that carry through and important characters, but it's filmed differently. I think it's almost made with a different intention in terms of what it wants to focus on. And I think that there are some people, and some people have said that like they claim if I started with Borneo, I would not watch the show again. Again, I personally disagree, but if we're going back to the subjectivity thing, I will acknowledge the fact that like if you've never seen Survivor before, maybe season 1 is not the best place to start, which will lead into our ultimate conclusion here. It
was for 50 million people, Mike.
Exactly. Beat Friends, but maybe those people were watching Friends instead.
No, Friends was not on during the summer of 2000.
I thought they beat the Friends finale, or maybe I'm thinking of Australia. Maybe beat the Survivor. Friends finale.
So the first season of Survivor aired on Wednesdays during the summer, not against first run episodes of Friends, which would have been
because they reared it in the fall, but it wasn't a first
hiatus. Yes,
to be fair,
yes,
Australian Survivor. So that was airing against. I mean, Survivor Australia was airing against Friends.
Mm-hmm.
Survivor, the Australian Outback.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But that was airing against probably like season 8 of Friends, which is like the worst season.
It was the final season of Friends.
No,
it wasn't. Friends ended in 2004.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So CBS moved Survivor, the Australian Outback, to Thursdays to compete against Friends.
Wow.
So starting with in the beginning of 2001.
And then once Friends was finally slayed, it took only 6 years later for them to be like, yeah, we'll move it back to Wednesdays from here on out.
Is that why Friends ended? Survivor slayed Friends?
No, it ended because they were paying that it was on the air for 10 years and they couldn't afford that. None of the people that were on it, wanted to keep making it, and they were paying them like
here's the thing: $1
million an episode.
If Survivor becomes too expensive to produce, will it go away and then we get Jeffy, a spinoff starring Jeff Probst that sort of functions down on the cast?
Friends just came to Netflix here. I don't know if the US is the same, but it's been.
I think it's left.
No, actually, it left. It went to HBO Max.
Oh, because we just got on Netflix like within the last couple of months, which was like best thing to happen to my lockdown.
Shannon, could HBO Max strike back at Netflix with adding more of your level 1 seasons?
No, yeah. I mean, wait,
That
was
would be
level 1
interesting
good or bad?
if
Yes,
we get
good. The
if
good
we get
season.
streaming wars as various sites put in season. Because I mean, Hulu, I think they have like 12 through like 28 or 34. I want to say so.
Including the Dark Ages?
Yeah, they just sort of took a big chunk, and I don't know what because I know Amazon Prime has like 1, 3, and I think also like 12 through 30 available for free for Prime subscribers. So I'm not sure what the deal is here, but CBS All Access so far is the only platform to have all 40 seasons, every single episode.
This is how we'll settle the debate. We'll give one like, you know, all the people that all the seasons that people fight over, each will go to a different streaming service, and we'll see which does the best.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
then that's really like a fun little scavenger hunt, right? Of like, oh, it's a choose your own adventure again, Rob. Like, oh, if you like strategy, go to Hulu.
Yes.
If you like character, go to Rest in Peace Quibi.
Are you an air fan, a land fan, or a sea fan?
Exactly. Who's the monk guiding us through these various steps of the temple?
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
I do think, yeah, I mean, flowcharts have been like the thing, like create a flowchart where if you like this, do that. And I think the reason we haven't gone in a flowchart direction is because we agree, Mike and I agree, that jumping around is bad. So to be like, do you enjoy this? Then you might go, you know, and then you start jumping around. Whereas for us, we wanted to go chronological, but still, I wanted to like give it a little bit of specific, like make it more specific.
You are the algorithm.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be.
The algorithm.
I'm trying to be. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if people will agree with this. I think everyone's going to have their own systems, but
yeah. But
the problem with the Borneo thing as well, it's like, again, it doesn't hold up. And it's like, well, I mean, like, I agree that Borneo is an iconic, important season of television, but it's like, so are they starting at Borneo because, as you said, they might never move on? Or did we start them at those 2 or 3 great seasons? They've seen the Cagayans, they've seen that, and then they're going back to Borneo.
So this is what I personally settled upon. This was actually suggested by the great Noah, listener of Rob Has a Podcast, that there is sort of a hybrid maybe to our 2 methods here, where maybe you introduce someone to 2 or 3 standalone seasons, like all newbies, see how they're at. If they're like, oh great, this is awesome, I want more, then start them at the beginning.
Now
and
you're
have
ready.
them move forward. Exactly. It's this idea of like, okay, you're into Survivor.
Now you're ready for the trials.
Now you'll be able to like, now I know that you're invested enough that you can take in all the benefits of watching chronologically.
Or
Is my
now I
training
know
over?
you're
No, it's starting.
Yes. But also, how much did you enjoy these seasons? Is this something that you're going to be obsessed with? Are you the kind
I'm
of person
not
who's
going to
watch-
send a survey to these people asking
I
how
am.
much they enjoyed things.
I am. I honestly, I have so many people come to me. A lot of Australian fans who are like, I'm trying to get my loved one now into the US seasons. What should I recommend? And I'm like, tell me about them. Tell me about yourself. Like, what do they enjoy? And I had someone say like that their girlfriend was really into like, you know, girl power and everything. So we went Micronesia. Like I really want to find out what these people like, because a lot of people as well have been trying to recommend to hesitant loved ones. These aren't even people jumping in. These are people who actively don't want to watch, but are trying to do a nice thing for whoever's recommending it to them. So then you have to be on the ball with like great seasons, because they're not going to take a lot.
And I'm saying you don't need to be on the ball or the Allen ball. Just have a couple seasons in your pocket. Show them to them. Have them watch a Cagayan. Have them watch a David versus Goliath. If they're like, this is a fun show, I want to enjoy more of this, go all the way back to the beginning. You have the option to skip through things if you indeed are like, I'm fine with this, let's move on. But now if you know that Survivor is a show that you want to watch after taking a dip in the water, now you're ready to take the dive in.
Did we achieve anything today? Did we sort out anything that
we achieved a lot? That your mentions are going to be full of people who feel like they.
That was the true goal of the podcast, was it not?
Very different opinions.
Notifications, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Rob, where do you stand in all this?
I feel like, and I almost it's weird that I feel like that you two have this conversation with people. I have very few conversations with people. I guess when they've already gone through it all, they find me. Nobody's like, I'm thinking about getting into Survivor. Where do you think I should go?
No one's gonna ask Boston and Rob what they should watch. You're above it.
With my seasons. You could skip heroes versus villains.
That's actually a good question. Have any Survivor alumni been asked what seasons to start with? Because I wonder if there is some like inherent bias there of like, I won't ask a contestant, they're going to say their own season.
Yeah,
Well,
maybe not.
Actually, when I put out the poll, Gabby from David versus Goliath commented to be like, don't start on David versus Goliath. You're missing so much context and everything. And David versus Goliath ended up winning the poll. And I felt bad because it's her season. She didn't want people to watch it. People started weighing
They're
in.
humble.
My
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not a conversation that I have with a lot of people of, what should I be doing? So I think it's interesting to hear your opinions and how you've helped guide people in the past.
I don't have a life. This is something we've discussed so much. I'm like, let me show you my color-coded system.
I think that I would, had somebody asked me that question, I think I would give them one or two. And then I think that I do not have the desire for like the hands-on training that Shannon is willing to give. I think I would be much more along the lines of the Mike approach. Like, all right, you watch 2 seasons, you like it. You're a Survivor fan. Go back to the beginning. All right.
Yeah, like go play. I think check
out the evolution of strategy if you want to hear what I think about any of these.
What if they're like, well, Rob, I'm not enjoying Borneo. What should I do? Then how do you guide them from that?
Well, maybe you're not a Survivor fan. Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of sense of what Rob is like as a parent. I was like,
yeah.
It's like maybe I don't know. I don't really know.
Yeah. I'll give you an anecdote from my own parenting today. That my son was doing Zoom school, which was terrible, and that he's like, and they dress himself, and he's wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and he's like, Dad, I'm cold. I said, hold on, son, let me get you a sweatshirt, and I went, handed him a sweatshirt. He put like one arm through the sweatshirt. It's like, oh, it doesn't fit. I said, then you're not cold. Then you weren't cold. But one arm, he barely tried to put it on.
The sweatshirt doesn't fit. You weren't cold.
Like it was like maybe it was like a size too small. Like maybe like I'm not a tailor. Okay, like this wasn't a fitting. The kid is cold, but he has a sweatshirt. I don't want to hear about that. It was not the exact fit. Then you weren't that cold.
That's it. Yeah,
and that's how I feel about the Survivor season.
You want the end port of the storm approach.
It's not exactly what I was looking for. Like, then you don't like Survivor that much.
I'm not enjoying this 20-year-old season that is like honestly a shock to the senses. Well, then you don't like the show. Goodbye. You wouldn't enjoy the Micronesias of the world. And Rob, I'm not a parent, but I like to think I'd be like, I'm cold. It'd be like, I have these color-coded sweatshirts for you at different sizes. Yeah. And we'll go through together which one you think would be best for you.
Yeah. Shannon would be like, okay, here's the closet for 98.6 degrees to 97 degrees on the temperature scale. Like you'd work down based on that.
Oh my God. I am a parent to Survivor fans as my mom was a parent to me. That's the mother I had. And that's how I parent these new Survivor fans. And
it's
I just realized it when you said it.
Yeah, this is similar to the way that I've been parented. Mike, does it hold true for you?
Yeah, I was very much parented in the way of just like find your own way of like, we'll give you some guidance, especially if you get in like a little bit of trouble, I'll give you some motivation. But like you are distinctly different than me. I'll lay out a path for you. You can walk it or you can do whatever you want with it, but you'll get to the end goal.
Choose your own adventure. Yeah.
Okay. Exactly. We definitely achieved a therapy session because I was very much like, Mom, I want a snack. Here are all your options. Don't like this option? Here's the section option. We want to discuss a third or fourth option. That was my childhood, and that's how I feel about people getting into Survivor. It should not scan as well as it does, but somehow it does.
I get, Dad, can I have a snack? Here's what the snack is. I don't want that. Then you weren't hungry.
Oh my God. I understand us as people. I understand us, all three of us as human beings.
This is enlightening.
Yeah, the way the way you request Survivor season says a lot about who you are as a person. Who knew? This is an Enneagram after all.
How you were raised. Sure. Okay.
This is a new personality type quiz. It's true.
Anything else about Survivor, Netflix, viewing order?
I know these are like exciting planes in front of us to have a bunch of new people exploring it. And I think Shannon and I have provided a number of ways that you can engage new fans in doing so. But I think the bottom line of all this is it's cool to see new Survivor fans. Again, the attitude going into this show 20 years in, despite the big season that Winners at War was, oh, is this show still on? And we have now affirmed by saying, hell yes, this show is still on. And so I think, hopefully this has been proving a bit to the naysayers of like, wow, Survivor's so past its time and blase. And I say that as a Simpsons fan, that it's very much not the case in a certain regard, that there are things that are beneficial to watch no matter what order or what way you show them. And hopefully we have illuminated a number of ways that either you can show these seasons to people or that you can parent, apparently.
Yeah, Survivor is great. We were right. Everyone else was wrong. Society should be ashamed of itself. And we've been vindicated as a community. And I think that's what's wonderful is that everyone was like, did anyone know that Survivor was so good? And everyone's like, yeah, we as a community did. And we've been
new
for a really long time. Yeah. So told you so.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Do we have any sort of takeaways of what the consensus is from the people that are watching Survivor on Netflix? Like, I feel like that this is, for a long time, we've talked about the casuals on Facebook. What are people saying on Facebook? But do we have any sort of sense of, other than random Twitter posts from celebrities, that what are the Netflix Survivor fans thinking?
Yeah, it's a good question as to like who's going over well. I do feel like Parvati is going over well.
Tony is as well.
Yeah, during Heroes versus Villains. I feel like it's
not a lot of woo was robbed.
Yeah, not a lot of woo was robbed. I do think the Russell argument is interesting because I think at the time there have been a lot of like either Russell fatigue or just massive Russell buildup that it's a little bit of a weird experience to only see one season of Russell just dropped in there. And granted, he is heavily involved in this season, but I feel like when you take it out of context, he's sort of regarded in a different way.
Yeah.
Where yes, he's a large character on this season, but when you don't exactly know, like, oh yeah, there's this whole controversy where everyone's saying he should have won Samoa, there's a very different way of viewing him.
For Russell, probably would have been a lot better if they just put Samoa up and not Heroes versus Villains.
I think so. I mean,
you get a lot more like, oh, Russell should have won.
I mean, there's still things like, you know, the whole like Tyson split vote thing and like the letter stuff that is still like fun stuff for Russell to do. But yeah, especially the latter half of that season is not very kind to the legacy of Russell Haynes.
At least they didn't do Australian Survivor 2018. I'll say that for Russell.
Yeah, he dodged a bullet there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Tony Love has been...
Island.
Yeah, he should be fine with Heroes versus Villains. I think the Tony Love has been too much because, as I've said, it's been sending people to Game Changers or Winners at War, which is the worst, like two of the worst places to go for different reasons. But I will say, like, people are loving it. I think because I've tweeted so much about Survivor on Netflix, I get a lot of people responding. Someone was like, I just discovered it. How did I breathe before this?
Yeah, exactly.
How did I breathe before this?
Yeah, and I'm like, that
Shania Twain song or whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah, how did I live without you?
Is the hashtag Survivor on Netflix or Survivor?
I just tweet Survivor.
Yeah, I've just been looking at I think the way is if you want to get to these people, don't even use the hashtag. Just type in Survivor. I will also say something that I have seen is due to the current environment, maybe not so much love for Sarah Lucina as an example from an occupational perspective, but also a lot of love for people like Jatia and Bryce. The Cagayan pre-mergers have almost seen like a bit of a renaissance.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for
that's
Bryce.
great to see.
Yeah.
Happy to see that Jatia and especially Bryce getting some love well past when it was due.
Yeah, and even like you know, may he rest in peace, Uncle Cliffy. Like his Survivor legacy lives on here posthumously, and people get to sort of look back on that as well. Also watching things like the fall of Garrett Adelstein, for example. I do wonder how like the fall of David Sampson looks in 2020, given like everything he has been through as well since that time.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Shannon?
No, I think I still don't know if we achieved anything. I think we got to some personal places, but I just, it's a subjective thing. Recommend to your friends. Please don't scare them off like we did to my one friend. And I'm excited about the new generation.
Yeah, no matter what, don't show them the first 2 episodes of Game Changers as their first.
He was so confused because everyone was like sobbing. Like, you have to understand this was a weird night for him. Tony went home and everyone was like, we're pained by this. So yeah, it was in hindsight just an absolutely terrible idea to have that viewing party.
There was the 500th episode of Survivor. There was excitement. Tony was back. I think were you not spoiled at the time, I think you would have some understandable excitement there.
We were so naive.
All right, Shannon, what's next for you?
What is next? Well, I'm doing a podcast next week with Taryn Armstrong.
Wow.
I haven't said what it is. Yeah.
You can't say what it is?
A dream podcast couple.
Well, I've been doing I'm trying to do a game theory series. I've done one podcast in it so far about analyzing the social game. Should I say what it's going to be with Taryn? It's very niche. So we're going to be talking about plurality votes.
Oh, this is truly the level 4 of strategy podcast. This is
But
this,
level 4 is bad.
Sorry, level. Well, no, if you're really invested, really invested in strategy, like this is a podcast for you.
Okay.
So I've always wanted to talk hardcore strategy with Tara, and I've only podcasted with him once, which was the Taran show. And I was like, let's do something. Like I gave some ideas about like some like niche strategy, getting into these like strategic tools or moves. He said he was interested in plurality votes. Anyone who's listened to me knows that's something I'm obsessed with. I'm so excited about this podcast. It's going to be hyper strategic, so we're going to do that next week.
Plurality votes for the listeners who are uninitiated. Yes.
And I will do that on the podcast as well. But it's whenever someone is voted out without a majority of the votes counted. So idols don't count. Like Kelly Wentworth idling out Savage was 3-0. That's a majority.
So like Cerise 3-2-1 is an example. Infamous 2-1-1, which is Shannon's favorite vote configuration in the world, is a plurality vote.
It's up. We're going to have a whole section on that. But yeah, like anything where people make magic out of these numbers. You have 9 people and you win with a 4. How? What are the categories of how people do it? How could you do it if you were on the show? How do we analyze this in greater detail? I hope people are as excited about this as I am, because I think it's going to be great. So I've got that coming up next week. So that's pretty much my what's happening. And then Mike, did we want to tease what we're doing? You do it.
Yeah, let's tease it. So Shannon and I, obviously, Survivor South Africa is not necessarily coming by soon, but Shannon and I, we covered season 6 and season 7, which was sort of part of this reboot era of Survivor South Africa. But we've had a number of requests, especially in the intervening months, of, hey, you guys have you ever watched season 5, Champions? Would you check it out? And I think, as the Survivor offseason continues along, I am very excited to announce that starting next year, starting in 2021, the Survivor South Africa podcast is going to be reinvigorated with a Survivor South Africa season 5 first watch / rewatch. Shannon has never watched it before. I have, but to be candid, I don't remember a lot of it. So we're going to be doing, some episodic coverage of that, including all the fix-ins as well. I'm assuming we're going to be giving out some chizzy points as well. But of course, I am like over the moon every time I get to talk with this person in Shannon Guss about anything Survivor. And so to be able to come back around Survivor South Africa while we are patiently waiting for a new season to come, I'm happy to go back into the past and explore a part of Survivor South Africa we haven't really spoken about.
Okay. Well, that is very exciting to hear. Looking forward to that. Have you announced when this is happening?
I don't think we know.
Yeah, I think we're potentially
2021.
I think we're potentially eyeing early on, and we're still trying to figure out if we'll do like 1 episode a week or 2 episodes a week. So we'll figure it out. But it's coming at some point next year.
Had one conversation about it, but Mike was I was always planning on watching season 5 in this long off season. Mike's like, we should podcast about it, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty much where we're at with it.
Should we check in on the Great International Survivor Horse Race? That as of December 2020, which international incarnation of Survivor do we feel like will be first to get back on the air?
Survivor South Africa.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, look, I think it looks good for South Africa. Australia just filmed some things that are more difficult to film.
And they're also, I know that, again, if reports are to be believed, Australia has been exploring options of almost filming in country as well, which I know South Africa had been pursuing for quite some time, which is a major reason why I agree with Shannon that South Africa would be first, is because this is an option they were already looking into.
Yeah.
Australia is now, and maybe not completely in-house, but maybe the United States is looking a bit closer to home as well.
Yeah, well, I only mention it because of the latest rumor that Survivor could be potentially looking at trying to do an iteration for the summer of 2021.
I think there's a very good chance that we could have all 3 franchises on at the same time.
Wow.
Oh my God, Shannon, no.
Is that a dream come true or a nightmare for you?
Can you handle that?
At the moment, it's a dream come true, but how long will it be till I'm like, remember that off season?
It's a Survivor nightmare.
Oh, there's that fan of Jeffra.
That person like, hey, okay, where's my more Jeffra seasons?
Doesn't know where to go from here. I mean, if Survivor US is going to do the summer, that's generally where Australia.
I'll believe it when I see it. I think that's probably a little bullish,
especially with Big Brother 23 already confirmed.
Because I mean, Australia could film but they're filming I'm a Celebrity right now in house. in the country as we speak. That they filmed An Amazing Race around the country, which is so much harder to film than Survivor. So if they wanted to film Survivor tomorrow in Australia, they could do it. They just, Channel 10's doing some other stuff right now, but they are on a good path to filming the show, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think also, yeah, like you said, it's also programming where like Channel 10, I think they're pretty like well up for the spring, right, in terms of shows right now. So I think they don't necessarily have a need to be like, oh, we need a Survivor season again. I know that before all this happened, they actually intended on doing 2 seasons in 2020, but I would imagine that they sort of pursue it, whether in country or not, filming something in the summer. US is TBA, but I would not be surprised if something goes on with South Africa very soon.
Okay. All right. Of course, Mike and I got to talk earlier this week, not just about The Amazing Race with Jessica Leese, but we also got back together for Outwit, Outplay, Outlist. This time, we talked about Survivor's noticeable hats. Of course, the most iconic Survivor hats. We had a lot of fun on that podcast with Chantel Francis. I thought that was a really another fun edition about Wit, Outplay, Outlist up at robhasawebsite.com.
Look, if you have already recommended a bunch of seasons to people using whatever logic, and you're like, I just really want to marinate on some very silly miscellaneous topics through Survivor history, absolutely check it out. We had a great time going through 20 hats. And if you haven't checked it out yet and you like this configuration of the three of us, I've got good news for you. A couple of weeks ago, Shannon was the guest on Outwit, Outplay, Outlist, where we talked through 20 memorable Survivor immunity necklaces, and a lot of fun was had. I've had so much fun with that during the off season, and I cannot wait for that to continue as we try to figure out both what seasons to recommend and what seasons may be coming down the pike.
Of
yeah,
course.
I'm not sure there are two more different podcasts than the what immunity necklace looks like a sex toy versus the history of plurality votes.
Yeah.
That's a very different
It really
place.
is the Goofus and Gallant of Survivor podcasts.
Hey, look, we try to cover it all here
You
on
do.
Rob
Not
is
at
a
all.
podcast.
Yes.
Of course, if you're looking for more noticeable hats, you'll find that and more in our brand new RHAP merch shop. Check out a bunch of the new items that we've just added, like Netflix is adding Survivor seasons to its catalog at robhasawebsite.com/shop. And of course, it's the start of a brand new month here in December. A great time to get on board with everything we're doing over at robhasawebsite.com/patron. And of course, if that's not right for you, but you want to, of course, find ways to support the show, check out our sponsors page for all of the sponsors we talk about on the podcast and the offers they have for our listeners at robhasawebsite.com/offers. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.